Okay. Hello. Can everyone hear me? All right. Hello and welcome to the December 11th meeting of the CB2 Land Use Committee. All right. We have on our agenda a presentation tonight from. Hello. 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 Hey, how's it going? All right. Welcome to the December 11th meeting of the CB2 Land Use Committee. I'm Eugene Yu, Chair of the CB2 Land Use Committee, and with me is Katie Bordenaro, Vice Chair. We have one item on our agenda for tonight, which is a presentation about the development at Gansevoort Square. We're very excited to hear this presentation and see how this will affect our district, our neighborhoods, and add to some much needed housing within our community district. If I could quickly go through and have the CB2 Land Use Committee members introduce themselves, starting in the room. Stella Fitzgerald.
Hi, everyone. Arturo Fernandez.
Susan Wittenberg. Donna Raftery.
Carter Booth.
Sean Sweeney.
And then online, I believe we have
Frederica Siegel.
And we also have Susan Kent, Chair of CB2 online as well.
Good evening.
Good evening. So just a brief overview of what we'll be going through. We'll have the presentation from New York's EDC, and then followed with questions from the Land Use Committee as well as CB2 members. And then we'll have a public session. For anyone that has not signed in, please sign in at the front. There's a sheet for sign-ins for everyone attending the meeting. And if you would like to speak, please make sure you spelled out a speaker card. There's a speaker card that's also on the front, and then we'll be able to call you during the public session for any comments. Where is he? Okay, also online, we have John Paul DeVerna, who's a public member. There, okay. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to, sorry. Oh, sorry. Thank you. We'd like to first have remarks by Eric Botcher, who's joined us tonight. Hi, Eric. Hi.
Thank you, Eugene and Katie, for this courtesy, and thank you to the committee for having me tonight. So tonight we're the community board, your committee. You're doing something that's among the most important things that community boards do, and you're discussing public land and how to utilize that public land for the maximum benefit of our community. You're going to hear a proposal that includes benefits for the High Line, for the Whitney, and also affordable housing. What we have to do as a community is work together to come up with a proposal that works best for our community. That means a proposal that delivers the maximum benefits that also fits within this neighborhood. And we have a long process ahead, a long land use process ahead. But tonight is a critical piece of that, in which you're going to see this presentation, ask questions, get answers. And I look forward to working with all of you in the weeks, months, and years ahead on how to utilize this precious, precious parcel of land, one of the last remaining virtually undeveloped pieces of land for our community. So thank you to Community Board 2, Katie, Eugene, and all the members for your work. Thank you to all the residents who are here, all the stakeholders. I look forward to, as a community, coming together and coming up with something that works for our neighborhood that delivers the maximum benefit to our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eric. Much appreciated. So, yes. So if we could elevate online the New York City, there should be an account on the Zoom logged in with New York City EDC. Should be NYC EDC. Could possibly, Anthony, could possibly listen. Is it, what's the name? Could you raise your hand in the Zoom and then we'll elevate you? Oh, it's you. Okay, sorry.
Good evening. My name's Gigi Lee. I am a vice president at the New York City Economic Development Corporation in the Government and Community Affairs Division. I'm delighted to be here with the community board today. At first, I want to thank you for inviting us to present our vision for Gansevoort Square. And while we are waiting for the deck to load and be shared, I would just like to take a moment and just have the folks that are part of the presentation and will be speaking to just introduce themselves, and then we can kind of save that step when it gets to it. So why don't we go in the order that we'll be speaking in.
Yes. Good evening, board and public. Dan Kaplan, senior partner, FX Collaborative Architects. Pleasure to be here. We have been retained by EDC as part of the master planning effort.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sunitha Amaraj. I'm a senior vice president in real estate at the New York City Economic Development Corporation.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Joe Tarver. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Friends of the High Line. I'm glad to be here tonight.
Hello, I'm Scott Rothkopf, the director of the Whitney Museum.
How are we doing? All right, I'll just talk through some of my introduction slides. So on today's agenda, what we're going to do is I will present sort of the overall vision for the project. We'll then go into the site plan, and then move on to milestones moving forward in the process. We're going to speak to something very important, which is additional public engagement, and then we will be happy to answer any and all questions posed by both the community board and the public. I would just, before I start, just like to stress and reiterate what the council member just said, which is we are very, very early in the process. There will be years before we enter into ULURP. And I think, this board and this committee is no stranger to the ULURP process. You know that's where a lot of, the critical questions and issues that you're going to have today. That's where the community board, is first in line to offer recommendations. So just want to make sure that, we wanted to come early, and we're excited to, start this conversation with the community. Oh, for the folks on the screen, we're just having some technical difficulties. We haven't started. You're not missing anything. Here we go. Is that going to be can it be bigger, or that's full screen?
Full screen mode on top where it says view. Yeah.
Sorry.
Full screen mode, all the way down there. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah, and then kill actually kill the folks online. It's over here. That's the one.
It's from me, so just let me know when you need the next slide. Sure.
Let's just start and we'll figure it out. So apologies for the delay. Thank you for the patience. So we've advanced beyond the first slide, which is the agenda for tonight. And we'll just go straight into the overall vision. So just to ground folks, each of the project partners as to the overall vision and what we're hoping to achieve on this piece of land, right? So the city sees this as, the project partners see this as a sort of once in a generation opportunity to activate city-owned land into a residential, educational, and cultural destination. So what are those buckets, right? We have the city delivering on mixed income housing. We have the expansion of a world-class cultural institution. We are securing space for the future needs for Parks and the High Line, who are looking to provide year-round programming and expand programming that is very successful. We are supporting the transition of the current co-op vendors that are at the meat market. And then we're also focusing on developing public realm improvements in the neighborhood and making the meatpacking district a 24/7 live, play, work community. And so you'll see each of the project partners will come and speak a little bit to sort of their vision and also, just really thinking about the how all these pieces fit together and sort of the compromises that we've all made in this process to be, able to stand before you and present this presentation today. So with that as the background, we'll go to the next slide. And we'll start with neighborhood context.
Good evening. Before we get into the specific functions and uses on the site, we thought we'd just set the table and remind folks where the site is, what's on the site, and so forth. This slide is most of Community Board 2. The red trapezoid is the site in question. I think a couple of headlines here is one is at the edge. It's not in the middle. It's not in the historic districts. It's at the edge, adjacent to some very substantial public open spaces that are beautiful and have been beautifully invested in. And in addition, it's a place where, in our view, higher density is appropriate, again, outside of the core. Next slide, please. Just some more orientation. Aerial view, looking at the site. Gansevoort Street is behind the Whitney, obviously. 10th Avenue. There is what I call the divot, which is the bend in, on the west side of the existing meat market, building, which we'll talk about in a moment. Part of the proposal here is to recapture that as part of, the development side and also the public realm, Little West 12 and Washington Street. Next slide, please. Just from a zoning lot or lot development lot point of view, as I said, Gansevoort, Washington, 12th and 10th. The inner line is the existing site, and the triangle includes the expansion of the site into 10th Avenue, rationalizing the site and giving it really making it much more viable. Altogether, it's approximately 117,000 square feet of lot area. Next slide. So just some of the existing conditions, and then we'll go into the visions for each user use. Obviously, you folks know this way better than we did. This lovely park. It's wonderful. It's emerging. It's more than emerging. It's emergent in terms of Hudson River Park, the Greenway, West Street, bit of a barrier, limited crossings, especially right around the west side of the meat market. It's not pedestrian oriented. It's not pedestrian friendly. It's really, the red is really reads today as service. The blue asterisks are current entrances. The red or the magenta is the entrance to the High Line, and really the Whitney on the south side, and really creates this sort of wonderful anchor and south entrance to obviously the High Line, but also to this intersection is really sort of establishes the gateway to the district. So on the site, as Gigi said, it's there's the Whitney and the Whitney expansion. There is the Friends of the High Line and their expansion. There's open space and there's housing, and we'll take each one as they go, and then I'll come back and tell you how we arranged it on the site. So with that.
So thank you, Dan. So we're now going to turn to the housing portion of the project. Oh, sorry. Just make sure you can see it. We're now going to turn to the housing portion of the project.
Go ahead and pick it up. We're all.
Yeah, if you could move it up, that'd be great. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, great. So the housing portion of the project, which is a topic that you and all New Yorkers are interested in, very concerned about. Now more than ever, we are in the middle of a housing crisis, and our goal is to address this issue with the project. The Gansevoort Square project is an extraordinary opportunity to utilize the potential of a high-value public site to meet the city's ambitious housing policy goals on delivering affordable housing without requiring or dependency on government subsidy. Subsidy is a limited resource, and the wait time for developers to receive funds is up to 10 years. For this project, we can move much faster. We will unlock affordable housing sooner by using the value of the site and through the value of the property. So the site will be cross-subsidized with the market rate units. So what is cross-subsidy? I will go into more detail on what cross-subsidy is on the next slide, but would first like to discuss the affordable housing goals. The request for proposal, also known as RFP, for the development of the housing site will set the goal of maximizing affordability and maximizing the number of affordable units. These two goals will drive negotiations with RFP respondents. On affordability, the RFP will require that the project comply with the 485X program. This program mandates that 25% of the units will need to be affordable and at an average of 60% of the area median income. This is just the baseline, not the goal. We are going to go above and beyond. Our goal is to unlock as much affordable housing in this project as possible, and as soon as possible. We will require that RFP proposals not only exceed 485X affordability requirements, but also maximize the number of affordable units with the goal of 50% out of the total 600 units as affordable. This project is critical given the current housing landscape, especially in Community Board 2. In the 5-year period between 2018 and 2023, in Community Board 2, only 887 housing units received DOB, Department of Buildings, construction permits. In this same period, only 30 affordable units commenced construction, thereby ranking last among community boards in both categories. With this project, we have the potential to unlock valuable, affordable housing without dependency on government subsidy through cross-subsidy with market rate units. Next slide, please. Stepping back for a second for context, affordable housing in New York City is achieved primarily through developers receiving funding from the City Agency of Housing Preservation and Development, also known as HPD. HPD resources are limited and oversubscribed. As you would expect, developer demand for these funds far exceeds availability. Furthermore, federal regulation imposes limits on funding allocations annually. As previously mentioned, projects in HPD's funding queue face delays of up to 10 years after receiving public approvals such as ULURP. So what now? What are other paths to providing affordable housing? The strong housing rents in this neighborhood generate enough value to cross-subsidize the affordable units. Therefore, we have a unique opportunity here to deliver much-needed affordable housing quickly and without subsidy. Cross-subsidy in housing is a model where the revenue generated from market rate units instead of HPD subsidy are high enough to help to offset the costs of providing affordable housing within the same project. Its self-sustaining approach, providing mixed income housing units that minimizes reliance on government subsidy, allowing us to deliver much needed affordable units sooner and more efficiently. It's also important to note that this approach preserves HPD funding for neighborhoods that lack the advantages of a strong rental market, ensuring that those areas can still access resources for affordable housing that might not otherwise be possible. Next slide, please. So, our first step towards achieving the goal of a well-rounded mixed income program for this project is issuing an RFP. The RFP proposal selection criteria will explicitly require proposals to maximize affordability. All RFP respondents will be pushed to maximize affordability levels and affordable unit count. Proposals will be carefully reviewed and compared during the selection process, and the selected developer will also engage in further dialogue with the community during ULURP. Right now, we are in the very early stages in this process, and we are eager to hear your thoughts and work together with you as this project progresses.
I'll go ahead and hold this. Thank you for having me. I'm going to push this out of the way. Before I say anything, I do want to introduce two of my colleagues who are here. ID Arude, the Deputy Director of the Whitney Museum, and Jane Carey, who oversees our community affairs, and they've been great partners in everything that has taken us to this point. So before I share some of our vision for the future, I just wanted to say a little bit of background as to what sort of brought us here tonight. I will go back to 1930, but don't worry. This is the 1-minute version. When the Whitney Museum actually opened to the public in 1931, it was in this neighborhood, not so far from our current home on 8th Street between 5th and 6th Avenues. And over the ensuing years, we've actually had 4 locations in Midtown and then on the Upper East Side. And then since 2015, almost 10 years ago, back downtown where we feel we really belong. When we purchased the land from the city in 2011, we thought to ourselves, my goodness, we don't want to have to move again. We love this place where we are, and we want to think about the future needs of the museum and how we can better serve the community. So the city and the Whitney purchased, or not purchased, but made an agreement with the city, right of first offer, or ROFO, actually on the entire site, which is not at this point what we're seeking to buy. But I just wanted to give that background that this is not a new idea, that going back for quite some time, even before the Whitney opened, there was always the thought that this would be the only viable place for it to expand in its current location, and that might be something that we would one day want to consider, which is, of course, what we're here to talk about tonight. So maybe I can have the first slide. Just give you a sense of some of the key ideas that we have been considering. And really, it's about expanding our gallery spaces to show more art and meet the public demand that is far greater than we would have expected when we began to move downtown now some 15 years ago. You can see our interest in creating more access for our community, our neighbors, people from really all over New York and even beyond. We want to increase our educational offerings, which are now at maximum capacity. And we want to, as I said, remain in the community and keep serving it, as we think we've come to do, with a lot of interest from our neighbors and people from all 5 boroughs, in fact. So we go to the next slide. This slide is just a prompt for me to think about the fact that when we were uptown, we served 300,000 to 400,000 visitors a year on Madison Avenue. And we built our building anticipating maybe 800,000, which seemed like a huge number to us because it was more than double what we were dealing with. And this year, we'll be on track to welcome over 1 million visitors for the first time since the pandemic, which is something we're very proud of. Of course, many of them are from New Yorkers and school children, all different public programs that we offer. If you show the next slide, you can see that one of the things that the building has allowed us to do is to bring together artists, artworks, and our visitors, members of the community, in a very special way, given the expansive nature of the space, its flexibility in terms of how we can configure it. If you go to the next slide, you can see an image of our current exhibition, which is a partnership with the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, a pretty unprecedented coming together of 2 cultural institutions in New York. And we want to be able to continue to be a leader in a conversation about art and culture in New York and really all around the world. And it's important to us to support the artistic vitality of New York, both for the makers of art and those who love to look at it and learn from it. If we go to the next slide. One of the key ideas, in fact, the North Star of my tenure since becoming director just a little over a year ago, was how to make the Whitney a more inclusive and accessible institution. I've been at the museum for 15 years, but in January, we launched our 2 first free comprehensive admissions programs, and they are free Friday nights. Every Friday from 5 to 10, we're free at the Whitney, and the free second Sundays, which is the second Sunday of every month. We just had one this past Sunday. During those hours, we have seen an unprecedented transformation of our audience. Our average age is so much younger. Our median income has dropped, and our audience has become much more diverse, and we've attracted so many new members of the public. We've already, since January, given away more than 200,000 free tickets to the Whitney, and it's something that we are very happy to do. The artists who show there are excited about, and it's a funny coincidence. I'm standing before you today. Just today, we became free to everyone 25 and under. We have been previously free for everyone 18 and under, and that's not during those hours. That's at any time any person in that age group wants to come. And this was just a big idea for us. We found that during those Friday nights, 80% of the visitors in that age bracket said that the fact that the museum was free during those hours was very important to their decision to come, and that we wanted to make our offerings more accessible, more inclusive, and really push the boundary. That's made us a real leader in New York among large museums in terms of our efforts to be an inclusive and accessible institution. Go to the next slide, please. What those look like are concerts, all different kinds of events, things that bring together these new audiences that I mentioned. If you go to the next, you can see the Sundays are really geared towards family programs, educating youth in the neighborhood. I was there on Sunday with my son and daughter. And this is actually, you're seeing New York Public Library story time. We now are hosting the New York Public Library. Since its budget cuts, it no longer has Sunday open hours. So we bring the librarians to the Whitney. And all of these programs at this point are at pretty much at max capacity. Every single early event we did was sold out. We are turning, sadly, families away from some of our art making efforts, and we just want to not be in that position if we can, to serve the community even better than we do already. If we go to the next slide, you can see that some of these efforts involve, we hope, becoming the first fully bilingual large-scale museum in New York City in terms of our efforts with Spanish-speaking artists and audiences. You go to the next slide. And also bringing art out into the neighborhood and participating in the public realm. What you can see now, of course, is that this is a Kara Walker project from several years ago. We do have some open space just around the edge of the museum on the west, south, and east, but that has been sort of insufficient for some of the ideas that the artists have had, as well as for the desires of the community to be a part of the organization. So sometimes we've closed Gansevoort Street, as you can see here, not a very easy and always the safest thing to do for all sorts of reasons. And we imagine that if there were the new open space that's described in the plan that could serve several purposes, both a new welcoming entrance for the museum from the north, a light and air easement to some degree, which I'm sure you'll talk about more, a view corridor, and importantly, a place that the public can enjoy, whether it's passively in terms of hanging out or something that we might program from time to time. If you go to the next slide, you can see examples of that. The next slide, please. This was our Pride celebration in 2023. If you go to the next slide, you can see one of our older adult events that was actually inside. Go to the next. And you can just see that we're kind of bursting at the seams in terms of how we welcome the public, the community, the neighbors, and all our educational partners. So although this would be a very long-term project, as you heard already from Gigi, we do want to ensure that we can, going forward, however many years it takes, and purchasing land from the city, continue to do our best work with artists and all our visitors in the city. Go to the last slide, I think. So I'll just say thank you. I live not far from the museum. ID lives around the corner from it, and I love being a part of the neighborhood, both in my home life and my work life. And I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say about the future of the museum in this place. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. I'm also joined by Kristen Roth Schreffer, our communications director at Friends of the High Line. Like the Whitney, we're very excited about the opportunity for expansion of our maintenance and operations building because it will help us meet the growing demands of the park and increase our impact on New York City. This year is the 25th anniversary of the founding of Friends of the High Line. It's also the 15th anniversary of the opening of the first section of the park. 15 years ago, we thought that we would have annual visitor attendance of about 350,000 people. This year, we anticipate we're going to be somewhere between 6.5 and 7 million people on the High Line. The park is also 3 times longer than it used to be. It's now about 1.5 miles long. So now, 15 years later, we have some constraints. Not all of our staff can be in the building on the same day. We just don't have the space for them. We don't have enough space for public art fabrication. It's the public art that you see on the High Line, or for the equipment that we need to maintain the park. We also realize that there's a huge appetite for programming year-round. And at best, we can only run programming about 7 months out of the year because it's all outside on the park. So we would like to have indoor space to run educational programming during all 4 seasons. We recently hosted a talk with Pete Aldoff on Chelsea Market Passage. He's the noted Dutch landscape designer who designed the plantings on the High Line. And it was a cold October night, and we maxed out at almost 300 people at that event. So we know that the appetite for programming is there. With space year-round, we can go deeper with the local community in the programming we do. And we can do the same for New Yorkers from all five boroughs. Our plan is to engage our stakeholders to figure out what exactly that programming will be. In terms of the expansion of our building, our plan is to add 2 floors above the current building and then to expand out to the north about 30 feet into what is now the Meatpackers courtyard. So for us, expansion is our opportunity to dream bigger for the future, better support the needs of the park, and better serve New Yorkers. Thank you.
Good evening, all. My name is John Jabagi. I'm the owner of Jabagi Meats and a third-generation meat packer. I'm also the president of the Gansevoort Meat Co-op. My grandfather came from Budapest and in 1900 landed here, found a job working for Swift and Company in the meat industry. In 1925, he started his own business. My father was born in 1912. Went to work for my grandfather in 1930. So my family's been in the meat industry down here for 125 years. I started down in the meat market in 1970 when I was 14 years old. And when I started, it was the most amazing place. It was booming. It was still the boom years, and it was just hectic. You couldn't get down 14th Street or any of the streets. Trucks were backed in on both sides, workers, meat being unloaded. And I will tell you, it was just the most amazing place. But that in the mid 80s started to change. Companies started going out of business and they were due to industry causes. And they were replaced by non-meat tenants. So little by little, starting in the late 80s, 90s, the meat packers shrank. Market got smaller. Now what's left is our little building. And quite frankly, our building was built in 1950 to replace the open air Washington market. And the way the building was built and designed was it was 33 small units, small coolers, and they were meant to house the street vendors that had been in the open air Washington market. The building, quite frankly, the building is old now. The size and configuration of the coolers don't meet current standards for processing and distribution, and our infrastructure is decaying and getting old. This opportunity that the city is offering is a great opportunity for us to move on to newer, more modern facilities. EDC has been a great landlord. City Hall has been very supportive to us since day one, since the High Line came and the Whitney came. And if anything, we have been treated as first among equals. So we support this project is good for us. We support this project 100%, and there's no one else we'd rather see and get our site than the Whitney and the High Line. They have been friends, neighbors, and partners, and we're behind them 100%. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a few more words before I show you the master plan. Talked about the public realm. I'll show you the proposed public open space at the northeast corner in a moment that was referenced earlier about for the Whitney, but I just want to bring up this area that I know the bid has been very interested in as well, which is the kink or the divot in the west side of the meat market now. And really the proposal is to just basically take that over, pedestrianize the frontage. It was designed for trucks backing in and out and turn it back to people. Basically, all these points, modernize the corridor for contemporary needs, make it really a gateway to the open space to the west, improve the sidewalk experience, really make it, right now it's pretty much of a barrier, and really make it connective. And then finally, in terms of status, EDC is currently in collaboration with DOT to make this happen. So if you go to the next slide, please. Here it is, if, on the street, if you sort of imaginarily draw a line from where the FedEx is to this car, it just goes where the cones are, and that would be taken over and really beautified and made connective back to the grid. Next. So just to reorient, the Whitney's on the left, the Friends of the Highline building, the courtyard that was referenced. This is where their expansion would be, the Gansevoort Meat Market. That would come down. We would take over the triangle. And so how do we balance all of these functions and needs on the site? If you go to the next slide, this diagram really shows the sort of forces that we were working with. I do want to pause and take a note that ourselves, FX, worked with the Highline architects, the Whitney's architects, to come up with a consensus plan to make sure that everybody's needs were being addressed and met. And there was a real balance of forces here. The first is that, as you heard, the Friends of the Highline want to stay where they are and expand north and expand up, so they have direct access from the Highline and have a facility that really works for them. The Whitney wanted to expand to the north, use their already existing vertical circulation and entrances and really connect seamlessly, so they really had to go to the north. When you think about the residential function, that really wants to come from the north on the south. The right place to enter a residential building on this block would be from 12th Street. I mean, not from the west side, not from Washington Street. This corner, also as a location for a residential building, it's the furthest away. It's away from the Highline. It sort of has its own identity and presence and separated from the Whitney itself. So part of the idea would be to create a open space in between the Whitney and the new residential building, and that would sort of coordinate and culminate at the corner with the open space that was referenced before. So if you go to the next slide, how does this translate into a plan? So this is I wouldn't call it a design, I would call it a sort of territory plan, if you will, but it has a lot of great information. First, this is just working south to north. The Whitney expands in a very contiguous way to the north and wraps around a expanded Highline, Friends of the Highline building, giving them the contiguous space they need and want to expand and function properly, and also have critically frontage on two corners. The Highline, as I said before, has frontage on Washington, but also critically from the elevation of the Highline. The open space would be at the northeast corner, connecting to this open space that separates the Whitney from the housing, and the housing building would be at the northwest corner, the north point of the site. It's approximately 10,000 square foot footprint. It's separated. It allows the identity for each of those elements just to stand on their own and not be intertwined. And then from a volumetric point of view, these are, I'd call them sort of jelly mold. They're not designs. They're really just spatial envelopes at this point, so that designers can work within them. But you can see the Whitney has the ability to wrap around. The Friends of the Highline with their 25 to 30,000 square foot expansion, and then the residential on the north side. I also want to point out that the housing footprint itself has a unique shape. It's a wedge, it's a flat iron. I think it has the virtue of having its narrow dimension that is.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Someone needs to mute, please. Okay. The house. I'll
It's
try to, I'll
John
just try
Paul.
to, I'm gonna
Good.
power
Someone
through
on
just a little
slide.
bit. Sure. So it has the virtue of being a wedge shape with a narrow dimension facing the Highline. the face
some
of
open
the
space.
residential
Let me
building
make sure it's
approximately 80 feet away from the High Line. It's really, the width of a avenue. It's separated. And I think critically, most housing that you see getting built and designed and produced in this town are what I call are slab form buildings. And this really has the ability to be what's called a point tower building, which is much more elegant. I think it's much more unusual. I think it will be a very complementary form to the massing of the Whitney and the Friends of the High Line building. If you go to the next slide. So this is this centerpiece shows in purple on the right a sketch of, or really a profile of the Whitney, what could happen within that envelope, their new and existing building. And the yellow is what that envelope of the housing produces. And as I said, it's a point tower. We're targeting 600 units. Where the aspiration is for 50% of those to be affordable. And in with that 10,000 square foot footprint, this is the result. And it's somewhere about 600 feet tall. And our feeling is the elegance of the tower, the footprint, the point tower aspect, the non-slab aspect really makes it compatible with the Whitney and the Whitney expansion. I would also say it's at the northwest corner of the site, the north part. It's the most furthest away from the High Line as we can make it, and it enjoys the open space to the west where there's the West Street, and then of course the park and the river itself. With that, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Dan. So just a couple slides to wrap up. Key milestones as we move forward in this process. We started engagement on this, I think it was announced in October. So we are, again, at the very early stages of this engagement conversation. And we hope to, if you could advance to the next slide. We hope to release a housing RFP in January of 2025 with a target ULURP certification in 2026. And so additional opportunities for engagement. We really wanted to make sure after introducing this project to the community today that there were additional opportunities to hear feedback and thoughts. So we have planned, if you go to the next slide, 2 additional engagement opportunities. I know I'm going to get heat for this because December 19th is the CB2 full board. So I just want to say very clearly that both of these engagement sessions are meant to be duplicative, meaning that the presentation at both will be exactly the same. They're meant to be 2 options for you to attend one or the other, and both will be, there will be a hybrid option. They'll both be at Pier 57. We have flyers with all this information at the end here that you guys can take with you, so you don't have to be taking screenshots right now. And then lastly, I think what we would like to hear feedback from are these sort of 4 key areas that we want to focus on. One is your goals for affordability. 2, there will be an opportunity to think about what retail you want on the ground floor of the residential building. Again, we want to better understand what your hopes are for the public realm and street life around the site. We really are thinking about this project from a 360-degree public realm, pedestrian experience sort of approach. And then also your thoughts around design and design. What you saw today are envelopes, right? Maximum massing. The buildings have not been designed yet. So with that, I think that concludes our formal presentation, and we're here to answer any questions. Also, we have an email if you guys want to reach out to us, gansevoortsquare@edc.nyc, and then we also have a project landing page off the EDC website. We have project one-pagers as well with high-level project vision and goals at the end of the table with all this information. So with that, I turn the meeting back to Eugene.
Okay, thank you very much, Gigi. Very much appreciated the presentation. And my thanks to you as well as the other members of your team to present this, very exciting opportunity to redevelop and add to the cultural space at the Whitney, provide additional space for Friends of the High Line, and add some well-needed housing in conjunction with the evolution of the meat packers in the district. For the session, we're going to open up first with questions from the Land Use Committee. We'll follow this with questions from other CB2 members that are in attendance, both here and online. And then following that, we will have questions from the public. A word on the public session, remarks will be limited to 2 minutes, which is typical for our meetings at CB2. For speakers from the public that would like to speak, if you have not filled out a speaker card, please do so that we can call you in the room. And if you are online in the Zoom and you would like to speak during the public session, please go ahead and use the raise hand function so that we can identify you and promote you to asking questions when it's time for the public session to commence. So I'll kick it off with a question from myself on the overall project. I want to say CB2 has been fortunate in that we have had opportunities to have additional housing in the district, such as the 388 Hudson project, which is also currently in process. The lead agency for 388 is the New York City Housing and Preservation Development Agency. And I'd like to understand why this particular project is being managed not with the EDC, but not with, HPD, but through EDC. If you could maybe explain some of the reasoning for the differences between the two projects, since that's something else we're very familiar with.
Sure, I'm happy to start and then happy to pass it to our real estate team to further elaborate. I think, first we talked a little bit about just the ability to deliver affordable housing on an expedited timeline, right? And so I think you've heard it mentioned several times in the presentation that the pipeline that HPD has right now is very, very long, right? Sometimes up to and over 10 years after ULURP approval. And, I think we are in a unprecedented housing crisis in New York City. And so speed is certainly a key factor. We talked a little bit about why we're using the cross-subsidy model in the deck. And I think that is one, unique to this site and the location of this site. I think we know that the rents that will be garnered by this site are they're going to be competitive, and that those rents will essentially, what the model says, cross-subsidize to build the affordable units. I think in addition to that, we mentioned that there is a limit to the volume of affordable units as to how they are delivered. And so each site throughout the city of New York, right, decisions need to be made on where those sort of subsidy lands. And there are, this site again is uniquely situated to be able to cross-subsidize for the affordable units, whereas other sites, while maybe also city-owned, particularly in the outer boroughs, do not have that ability. And so I think it is also a site-specific consideration. No. Did you want to add anything else? Okay, great.
All right, thank you for that. In terms of projects around the city, I understand that it's expedient to have this be run, as you said, not with the current model. Are there other housing projects currently being developed in the city that are using the cross-subsidy model on city-owned land, specifically for projects that are on city-owned land?
Yeah, so the one that I can think of off the top of my head in also in Lower Manhattan in Community Board 3 would be the Seward Park Urban Renewal Area, and which is now known as Essex Crossing.
Okay.
That was also a cross-subsidy model. And I think I would also like to add to your previous question. Again, I think a point that we are really trying to drive home here is that this is a vision that involves the Whitney, the High Line, open space and housing, right? And so there are some very unique challenges and factors that really lends itself to this project being an EDC project as opposed to an HPD project.
Okay, thank you. I've a bit of a tangential question to that as well. So with the city's commitment to housing and building housing to come out of the housing crisis, was there any thought given to different site plans that would have allocated more space to the residential component? I think the lot size for the residential component is 10,000 square feet, if that.
Approximately, yes.
Approximately. Were there any other considerations to, give additional space to residential, maybe some less space to the Whitney? Could we get some insight on that?
Yeah, and I think this was the site plan process that we went through. We went through many, many, many options, right? And I think here, call it a dance, a jigsaw puzzle, whatever sort of analogy you want to use. I think, in a compromise situation, we all walked away with some of the priorities and drivers that each of the project partners wanted. But it's not everything that everyone wanted, right? It's sort of the happy medium that we think we've reached. You heard the desire and just the popularity of both of these institutions and their desire to expand. I don't think, the Whitney had a lot of foresight and thought about it many years ago that it's something that they would want to do. And this is really the only way that they can do it. They have, great aspirations for art and public programming and education, right? And so I think I think this site plan checked off as many boxes as we felt like it could, given considerations to things like air and light and entrances and access and then some of that still needs to be figured out, right? With you all and the community to really think about how we can maximize, all those public benefits.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask other committee members, both here and online, if you have other questions. Sean?
Yeah, I have, thank you for your presentation. I have two questions directed to the gentleman from the meat industry. One's general and one's specific. I've always wondered, why did the meat industry move out? Because I remember how wild it was. Nice. I know what you mean. It was remarkable. But you just quickly said something about industry. Could you be more specific?
Yeah.
Was it like bigger? Was it conglomeration of bigger companies, or was it just easier to go to New Jersey with traffic and all that?
No, no, what actually happened was there were a lot of big cutters on 14th Street. 14th Street was the main thoroughfare. That's where the main large buildings were. They used to ship carcasses in, beef carcasses in quarters, veal carcasses whole, the whole thing. And there was a lot of processing and fabricating done there. And it was just amazing the way it was done. It was done quickly, in one door, out the other door, a limited number of cuts. And then the rest of the meat market would take the what we call subprimal cuts and keep processing them. So the big companies fed the little companies. What happened was the slaughterhouses, the big packers, started opening their own processing plants out west. IBP was the first one. So what happened was they went from being plain slaughterhouses to building another facility where they went from the slaughterhouse to processing. With the advent of vacuum packaging, That allowed them to package the meat, ship the meat, put the meat in boxes. You didn't ship fat and bones. And once the supermarkets started to buy those boxed fabricated beef cuts, that's where the industry started to change. So that wasn't only it, but that was the main thing where the big companies in the meatpacking industry started losing out to the packers out west.
Got it. Thank you.
But yeah, there were also labor and buildings were getting older,
Yeah.
decaying. So that,
And
that
a
was-
second question,
yes.
might not be so easy for you to answer. I understand why the Whitney would be very pleased with this and the High Line and the Realty Division of EDC. But if I were, I don't understand why you're supporting it. If I was in your place, I'd be kind of annoyed that I'm being forced. You rent, right, from EDC, basically? Yeah.
Yes.
So what do you get out of it? With all respect, I can't think of a simpler way of saying it. They're getting space. Why are you being displaced?
Yeah, but we're not happy with the building is old, and it really doesn't support modern processing.
Okay.
To do processing today, to do the right processing, we need bigger spaces. We need more electrical capacity. We need more machinery. For box distribution, the coolers are too small. The ceilings aren't high enough. The building's old and decaying. It really is. The infrastructure is aging. So this gives us the opportunity to move to new facilities.
So are you getting something from the city, like to move?
Yeah, we're getting, right. They're helping us with relocation. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because remember, we were displaced from a residential building and we
Yeah.
got quite a bit of money.
Yeah,
It was a down payment for my loft.
No, quite frankly, this is good for us and we're happy. There's 7 meat companies in the building. We're all happy about it and we support this 100%.
thank you.
This is a good opportunity for us.
All right, thank you, Sean. Susan?
Hi, I just wanted to continue a little bit about the future site plan map. I mean, speaking for the community, I can't see how this really benefits the community when just the tiny top left corner is for housing. When we started out this discussion by saying, you were pointing out that CB2 had created too little affordable housing, too little housing, period. Here's an opportunity for us. If there were more space for the housing, we'd get more housing, both market rate and affordable. So to me, this is outrageous. I mean, it's just such a giveaway to the Whitney. I mean, we all love the Whitney. That's wonderful. But I can't see how they should be getting what looks like almost 90% of the space. And it seems like a tragic loss for people in need of housing. And I know you said, Gigi, that it was just like, oh, we compromised. But I mean, that's really not a satisfying answer to people who are in a housing crisis to say, oh, we just compromised. Thank
Thank you for your question. I think it's, yeah, sure, happy to. So I think there's a 2-dimensional and the 3-dimensional. And what the Whitney needs is horizontal expansion. And that's why when you look at the 2-dimensional site plan, they have the footprint that they have, and in that it allows for the public and art to be seen in wide open plates. In terms of square footage, they are approximately half the square footage of the housing. The housing is by far the lion's share of the area here. So, Friends of the High Line is a modest footprint, modest amount of floor area. The Whitney has a much larger footprint, but about half the area of the housing, and the housing obviously has the most. Housing can be stacked. It can be vertical. Of building allows for the value to be created to cross-subsidize the affordability. And we, a broader, fatter, lower building would impinge upon the function of the Whitney. It would also close up the gap between the Whitney and the housing, which we all feel is very important for a few reasons. One is for light and air for the residential. Two is for public space. And three, it allows, the Whitney is a very important, obviously, institution, and architecturally, it's important that it reads in the round and it has pride of place. And same thing for the residential. It wants to have its own sense of, wants to be separated. So that's how we wound up with the site plan. So.
Sunitha, and then, or
I'll just comment on something about what you were saying, or just add in terms of the wide floor plates. A couple of things that may not be totally evident in the site plan as you see it is that about 6,000 square feet of our exhibition space, which is currently on top of the existing M&O terrace, let's say, the Highlands M&O building, we would be ceding that easement to the Friends of the High Line or the Parks Department in order for them to build up. So we're actually giving away a large chunk of space there that we currently use for our program. And we also, another, let's say 5,000 square feet of that is encumbered because it's under the High Line, which we're happy to try to, consider in terms of how we would help develop a streetscape on Washington, but it's not space that we can obviously like go up and do big galleries in. And so the last thing I would point out about our current building, which is just the nature of it, is that it's sort of hard to build onto east or west, like a new wing in that sense, because on the eastern side of the building to our north is the High Line M&O, and on the western side of the building is all the structure and the circulation core that essentially is holding up the existing building that can't really be torn down. So to build just a little there is quite difficult in terms of both the needs and the structure. And so that kind of has really led us to explore what we would think would be the most efficient floor plate that remains between the High Line and the High Line on the west and the M&O on the south, sorry, the High Line on the east and the M&O on the south. So we did really study that quite a lot and think about like what would be viable in terms of if you're going to add, how could you do it?
I just also wanted to remind everyone what Scott had mentioned when he was presenting about the Whitney in the original transaction. I think it was back in 2009 when they acquired closing. They also have a right of first offer on the site that we're discussing today. So they had the right on the entire site. So back then it was foreseen that the museum would expand across the entire property. So actually what led to the site planning was the Whitney recognizing that we can create additional benefits on the site, not just the museum and the cultural benefits. And that opened up the discussion and led to the site planning. So there is a history to this. And I think today we're at a better point than we were at the original transaction with the ROFO for the Whitney on the entire project. So, and that led to, as Dan was explaining, all these multiple uses which were incorporated into the site, the Friends of the High Line, the open space that the Whitney's providing, and the housing. So a much better project than we had foreseen, back then.
Thank you. Do you have one question? Because I wanted to also get to Frederica, but maybe we'll go to you. Yeah, okay, all right.
So piggybacking off of what Susan said, I'd be curious to understand more about a right of an offer. Does that mean that offer has to be accepted? How do you negotiate that offer? What was the back and forth you said of doing the puzzle together? Were there different creative options in that, and how did they all work out? It just seems you started this with saying residential, education, and cultural. And to Susan's point, the residential in terms of the floor plate is not taking up much of that space at all. And instead there's going to be a very tall building there to give the square footage to that. So that was the one question. That I'd also just like to know, with the affordable housing, are there different bands of affordable housing? How will that be interspersed throughout the building? How will all of that, the mix of all of that? And what are the other creative ways you could look at this before putting housing in, are there options to put housing, let's say with the Whitney building or with the Highline building or something like that? And my last point, I just want to point out while I have the microphone, is the two sessions you have. One is our full board meeting and the other one is our liquor licensing meeting, which cannot be changed because that's put on the calendar, and a lot of people from the public attend both of those meetings. I personally think it's a little ridiculous that both of these meetings for something this important on basically 4 weeks' notice over the holidays is being scheduled this way. It's a real disservice to the community.
So let me start with the questions about the affordable units, and then I think I'll turn it over to the real estate team who can speak a little bit more in detail to what a right of first offer is. So what we know for sure is that as part of 485X, you have 25% of the affordable housing in the building will be at an average of 60% AMI. So average means you can split that, for example, 3 ways. You can do a third lower, a third higher, and still average out at 60, right? So just for math purposes, and people just double check my math here, you could do a split the 25% 3 ways and do a third of it at 40% AMI, a third of it at 60% AMI, and a third of it at 80% AMI, right? Thank you. Okay. So that's just a variation, right? It could certainly be the whole 25% at 60% AMI, right? I think that is a conversation and feedback we would like to get from this community on how you would like that 25% split. In addition, our goal is to reach 50% affordable, and we want to hear from you once again how you would like that other 25%. We imagine the affordable program being mixed income, being multiple bands, and so I think that is something we're coming to you with and would like to speak, in more detail at the upcoming future engagement programs. As to the, I think you also asked about unit size and distribution. All affordable, all affordable units will be subject to an HPD regulatory agreement, which means that affordable units must have, 1, a unit mix proportional to the market rate units, or 2, at least 50% of the affordable units shall have 2 or more bedrooms, and no more than 25% shall have less than 1 bedroom. And so I think that, that is how we're hoping to, that is how we will be kind of enforcing that, that we're delivering on that commitment. I'm gonna turn it over to Sunitha again.
So regarding the right of first offer, the Whitney, when they acquired the current building, they also obtained the right for the entire site. So it is at their option to take the entire site or not and give up that right of first offer. So what we did, what led to this, all these site planning variations and options that we went through with the Friends of the High Line and the Whitney, was understanding, city's needs, High Line's needs. This came up during discussions of how we can create more benefits for the site. And the Whitney reduced their footprint and the portion of the site that they needed through this site planning process. So essentially, they had the right to the entire site, and through the site planning process, rather than taking the entire site, they have what you've seen now on the site plan of where we landed, which is a much smaller area than what was originally foreseen.
Was there, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I answered all your questions. Yes, so I will say we weren't aware of the January 7th conflict. We were aware of the December
They're on,
conflict.
they've been on the calendar. I'm just gonna say, everything's on the calendar and you're less than, a month before this.
Sure. We did look at the possibility of holding the meetings earlier so that it wouldn't conflict with the community board time. Unfortunately, the classrooms at Pier 57 are in very high demand and were not available for an earlier meeting. We did look into that. I think we are, we will be in communication with Eugene and Katie to have continued conversations about, what's transpired in those meetings. We wanted to just really build upon the momentum of the meeting today and just kind of continue having opportunities for all members of the community and public to continue meeting. So unfortunately, those conflicts.
There are did we look at Saturdays? Did we, Fridays? We don't have any community board meetings on Fridays. We don't have community board meetings on Saturdays or Sundays or any of those things options. The community is available then as
Okay,
well.
so what I will commit to you is we will go back and we will go look at whether we can move it to potentially a weekend. I think it is, I'm not saying we can, but I will make an effort because I think, as the board knows, finding space that can do hybrid and in person at the number of people that we want to accommodate is difficult, but we will revisit at least one of those dates.
Okay, thank you. Stella, okay. Can we first take a question from online? And then we'll go to Stella. So Frederica?
Yeah, hi. Sorry not to be with you. This is a really, really exciting project. We want it to be a win-win for everybody. Since this is city-owned land, I do feel as if the disposition of it should be a totally transparent process. And my questions have to do with the process. There are a number of them. I think we can move through them very quickly. What you just said about the Whitney having the right to the entire site, was that at anything that they offered? I mean, if I can see right of first refusal if there's a price the city sets, but how does it work that they have the right to the first offer? How is the price that they offer determined? I guess my questions are for EDC.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Kevin Dunleavy from EDC, also on the real estate team. Thanks for your question. Happy to answer. So the Whitney, it's important, as Scott mentioned before, when the Whitney moved to this location in 2009 and this right of first offer was negotiated, it was in both parties, meaning the Whitney and the city, both parties' mutual interest for the Whitney to be able to continue to grow in this location. As Scott mentioned, they didn't want to move again. And as John mentioned, the meatpacking district, even in 2009, was much different than it is today. And the city very much wanted the Whitney to move back downtown and take this location. Part of that, the strategy for the city was to offer the Whitney this, effectively the entire site. As Sunitha mentioned, the site plan that we reached is sort of a negotiated approach that we've taken that sort of circumvents the Whitney's right to the entire site. The Whitney, if the city wanted to sell any portion of this land, we would have to give the Whitney a right of first offer, and they could make an offer on that land. The city could, of course, decline that offer and attempt to engage with another private party through an RFP process. But if we weren't able to secure a price higher than what the Whitney had offered, the Whitney would just get it automatically. So we could have taken that risk as the city, but in developing this plan that we think achieves the goals of not only the Whitney, but also the city and the Friends of the High Line, we find ourselves in a much better position as a result.
Okay, thank you.
I
While
just,
you're
I just want to
there,
remind everyone, our power's gonna, we're gonna have the power's gonna recycle at right now. So this is we'll have the lights back on in a second.
okay, so actually, at the end of this process, who owns the land under the Whitney and under the Friends of the High Line building?
So for reference, the city owns the land, excuse me, the Whitney owns the land of their current museum. The intent is for the Whitney to own the land under their expansion. The city owns the land under the current Highline M&O facility. The city will continue to own the land under the expansion M&O facility. The city will retain ownership of the housing site, and the intent is for the city to ground lease that to a housing developer.
Does any of the, does the Parks Department come in on this? Does the Parks Department own any of this land? Or did they just administer it? And if so, which parts?
That's right. They just administer, the land is under their jurisdiction. It's owned by the city, but under their jurisdiction for the land under the M&O facility.
Okay, and whose jurisdiction will the open space be under?
That will be under the Whitney's ownership and management going forward.
Okay, thank you. And what, if anything, is planned for underneath the High Line on Washington Street, opposite the very vibrant retail corridor? Is there any retail imagined for that part of the project?
Dan, let me know if you want to speak more, but underneath the High Line, I guess, can we put this plan back up? I think there won't be any retail, to answer your question. There will be the M&O facility for the High Line, the Whitney expansion, and then open space. There will be retail on the residential portion, but that's on the northwest corner of the site.
Mm-hmm. And will EDC be coordinating the development of all of the buildings or just the residential building? And if EDC is just doing the residential, who's going to manage the other two projects?
I'm sorry, can we just go back to the retail 1 second?
Sure. Sorry.
Dan Kaplan, we just want to do a clarification. So, right, as was just stated, the M&O or the Friends of Highline building, their footprint extends out underneath the High Line, and then the Whitney's footprint, as you saw, extends out underneath the High Line. Within those two buildings, there might be retail. There certainly, given the two institutions, I would assume that there would be very street-facing functions, and just given their public nature and who they are. So to the degree that retail is sort of a proxy for street enlivenment, and as you mentioned, very correctly, reflecting what's happening across the street, I think we can expect that would happen.
Okay,
So I
thanks.
hope that clarifies.
Mm-hmm. So EDC will coordinate just the residential part, and who's going to coordinate will the Whitney do its own, the High Line will do its own, and EDC will do the residential building?
That's right.
Okay.
That's correct. And that is an important part of, and you've hit on some great points, that is an important part of the site planning criteria that allows each party to be in control of their own timeline, destiny, and so forth.
I'm glad I don't have to go to those meetings. And lastly.
Well, one last thing. I'm sorry, Gigi reminded. But while that's the case, there will be one ULURP and one coordinated site plan, so that, less like we came today together in terms of the entitlements and the land use issues, you can you could expect that that would continue.
Okay, so lastly, presumably, the Whitney and Friends of the Highline are each going to have to do some serious fundraising to see these buildings to the end. Are there any limits on how long they can take to start construction? And are there any interim uses for the space being considered while they are doing the fundraising?
Oh, thank you for your question. So yes, the Whitney will be undertaking fundraising as well as Friends of the Highline. And in terms of the timing on construction commencement and the phasing, it'll be tied to fundraising. Just full disclosure, we're currently in negotiations on all of these documents and all of these milestones. But it's all, you know, it will be a substantial capital raise that the Whitney will undertake and will take a certain amount of time.
So what happens in the interim? Is Hector's continue to operate? I mean, you know, does demolition start? What you know? What if they even fail to fundraise significantly?
I think this is premature for this discussion.
I'm asking the question, David. Sorry.
I understand, but other people, we have time limits.
Yeah, well, that was my last question. So.
Yeah, I mean, the first step is getting your feedback on the project, getting community input, you know, going through ULURP. So I mean, there's a long way to go, you know, before, you know, we're at a point where, you know, we have like the extended timeline. So
okay, thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. So I want to get to David Gruber. David Gruber, you've had your hand up for a while.
I have some questions. The 485X program, I'm not familiar with that. This is the first time I've seen it. Is that that mandates this 25% affordable housing with the three possible levels? Why and whose decision is it to use that program? Why is that mandated to use? Or I can.
So I just want to clarify before Sunitha answers the other part of your questions. It does not need to be split into 3 levels. The program itself is just 25% at an average 60% AMI. So splitting into 3 is just an example of how you could get there.
But why are you using that program? Why is that mandated?
So the parameters of the program, we're using that for the procurement so that we have a baseline to compare responses, and respondents are required to go above and beyond that. So it's really that additional layer, pushing affordability, pushing the number of units, right? So that is just kind of the baseline, and respondents will be the selection criteria will be above and beyond the 485X requirements. So if a developer, for example, were to just come in with 485X with the 25% of the units at 60% AMI, that's not going to meet the criteria, right? The RFP is very clear on going above and beyond those requirements. That threshold, let's say, not a requirement, it's the threshold.
Okay, because you know, there was a lot for us to absorb. You've been working on it for a while. We have to absorb it. But at some point, you said that you were looking for. Wait, let me just backtrack on this. This program you're saying it doesn't require any city subsidies because the strength of the housing market in CB2 will be more than enough to compensate for the affordable housing. Did I get that correct?
Right. So the rents that can be achieved in this neighborhood, the market rate rents, can subsidize the affordable units. So
just wanted to make sure I got that straight because there's a lot of if possible words are being used and our goal is, and I'm always nervous when I hear, if possible or the goals are without having it, really set in stone. And at some point you said that you're encouraging the lowest level of affordabilities from the developers in their RFP responses. You said it twice, I believe, and I wrote it down. So isn't it a conflict to say that you're looking for them to come up with the lowest level of affordability, and at the same time saying that the higher rents will subsidize affordable housing? I mean, and then saying if possible, well, that's our goal anyway. And it seems like a little wishy-washy to me. And I understand you're at the beginning process of it. My experience is sometimes these beginning processes get locked in and it's hard to the community to change it. So can you address that for me, please? Can you?
So,
Go ahead.
definitely.
You talk, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Oh, so we're at the very beginning of the process. And so we're not coming out with definite levels of affordability. This is a dialogue with the community, getting your input, and it is also getting feedback, eventually with the RFP responses, what comes in. And so there's going to be a dialogue also, an ongoing dialogue. So that's why, we're calling them goals at this point, because we need input. So we're just too early in the process to give any definite, affordability bands. And in terms of affordability, I believe I said maximize affordability versus low affordability. So just, again, this is about what does maximizing affordability mean to this community as well. So,
no, somebody, I don't know if it was you or Gigi, someone said that you're strongly encouraging the lowest level of affordability in the RFP responses.
Yeah. So in terms of the AMI bands, that is what, again, that's where we're seeking your input on the AMI bands and the affordability levels that the community would like to see here for this project, and what is most relevant for the community.
Okay, that's all I have to ask. Thank you for your responses.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you. I think Katie, you had
I have
a question that you wanted to.
I think, Kevin, I just need you to repeat what you were saying, or anybody, about the ownership of the land under the housing at the end of the day. I want to be very clear because what you said.
Hi, sorry, thanks. The city owns the land under the Gansevoort Market today.
Right.
It will retain ownership of the land under the housing, and we'll ground lease that, a long-term ground lease to a residential developer.
Okay, but you will retain, we will all retain ownership.
Exactly.
Well, I think in that case, I don't 100% affordable. I personally don't. I understand everything that you've said. I'm not saying this is not the first time I've heard it, but I think city-owned land should be 100% affordable. That's what we fought for at 388 Hudson, and that's what I hope that we're going to get.
Okay, thanks. Could I get Stella?
Okay. Hi, thank you. I agree with Katie. 100% affordability would be, what I think our community needs, obviously. I want to go back to Essex Crossing, which was mentioned as the other example of cross-subsidy method being used in the, I don't know if it's the only one or what exactly you said, I'm not sure. But from what I just did a quick research, I saw that it has more than 50% affordable units. And I want to learn about why that is. And I also see that HPD did provide some subsidy for those units. I'm wondering how much has HPD been involved in your discussions on this project? And if they've said that they are unwilling to offer any subsidy, if that has been 100% decided at this point.
Sure. So I'm happy to speak a little bit to Essex Crossing. So, you know, there's not going to be two projects of this scale in Lower Manhattan or that are going to be exactly an apples to apples comparison, right? So that was the first project that came to mind. At ULURP approval, it was negotiated to 50% affordable. Over the years, and it's been I think over a decade since that ULURP has passed, there have been some changes to the program because of the market and different things. But I will say that you know, we went through an extensive planning process with the community board. EDC did. It was also an EDC project. There was also you know, it was, I think, 9 or 10 lots, right? And so this was a large scale redevelopment that included the potential for a school and an expansion of Essex Market. And there were a lot of, and a building that was completely senior housing. And so the project, again, is not an apples to apples comparison, but it is an example of leveraging market rate units to be able to deliver not only affordable housing, but additional community benefits as part of the overall project. And then I'll let Kevin speak to.
Thanks. Just one more quick note that I think in the face of this housing crisis for the city, we as EDC and the city, in fact, the mayor signed an executive order earlier this year, I think in August, Executive Order 43, to identify city-owned sites where this model would make sense as a way, knowing that the HPD pipeline is so oversubscribed, to leverage this model of realizing the value that market rate development can generate on a site and essentially use that value to buy affordable housing without straining the HPD pipeline. So we're looking at not only this city-owned site, but many others to utilize this model as a way to just get more housing online faster.
Follow up. Are you saying that HPD will not be participating? That is 100% decided that they will not be a source of funding. That is a definite.
What we are saying that, but we're saying we are hoping to maximize the affordability of this building without relying on HPD.
Okay, thank you.
Carter, do you have a question?
Yeah, I want to go back to what Frederica was asking, because she asked, I thought, which was a very important question, which is the speed of executing this program, because you're using speed as the rationale for this cross subsidy model. And that goes back to developing the whole site. And I think it's important to answer her question about, you know, the reality of developing the whole site, and if that can be done on this within the same time frame.
So thank you for your question, Carter. I think, I'm going to answer this as best I can, given the unknowns, right? So yes, the speed is that we are committed to the RFP release in January, and then ULURP, certifying into ULURP in 2026, right? Passage of ULURP in 2027. So yes, there is a speed and a commitment and a desire for the city to move this along. But again, this is still three years out for ULURP. So this is, like, you know, I want to say that this is comparative speed, right? Like, compared to what an HPD timeline is, this is faster. As you know, the High Line and the Whitney, you know, I don't want to, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we are all engaging in good faith here, that they understand the scale of what they have to fundraise, that they believe that those goals are achievable. And we are all responsible for our own capital as part of delivering this overall vision for this site. Again, we are not at the point right now where we can say by X years, Whitney will have to break ground, or by Y years, if it's not up, this will happen. But I think those are certainly, there are standard real estate sort of terms that we are working through now to ensure. What I think your concern is getting at is like, what if one portion of it can't be realized, right? And I think, again, this goes to what Dan was saying before, is that we have purposely structured this this program so that there is a level of independence, because what Whitney has to raise and what the High Line has to raise is very different. But we've structured the program so that in ULURP, all the land use actions are together, because we see this as one project, but that we are moving forward on the housing because that is what the city is prioritizing now on this site. And that's why we're moving to get the other crucial partner, which is yet to be identified, which is the developer, right? And so having the RFP out, knowing what the market can demand for rents and what developers are, for example, putting down pen to paper on construction cost per square foot, what they think they can get of rent per square foot, and having a developer on board is the first step in getting clarity in a lot of the vision that we are sharing with you today.
And I guess the next question is a little interesting. I'm not sure when the city identified housing crisis. And we have two other areas where the priority was placed on commercial development, which is in Hudson Square and the Soho NoHo rezoning, where the thumb was not put on the scale for housing. And here we have cultural development also playing an outsized role with housing. And you also are using, higher cost housing to subsidize the other housing. And it would seem that even with that model, the cost would be higher than what most cultural institutions could afford. Even with that, because of the value of real estate in our community, we consistently see a reduction in housing because people are combining units. People are doing all types of stuff to get super high value housing here. And it would seem that this is just being really underutilized with what's, housing is a goal for the city to produce. And it would seem that might be reexamined, because we have two other areas where housing is not incentivized enough, and then we're being told we don't have enough housing, and then you allocate a little teeny bit of this site to housing, and it's also the scale of it and the way it's done is fairly extreme when there's a lot of space available here. So I think that these are the questions a lot of people in our community have with respect to this, and sort of understanding how this has all been put together.
Sure.
And mind you, the commercial priority was done over the objections of the people who live here. And just a reminder, since you had participated in it, we were told that Soho and NoHo are one of the third most important commercial corridors in the city. And yet, we're also held accountable for not producing enough housing. So it's just hard to put all these pieces together here, and
Sure.
then hear that to subsidize this, we need to do more luxury development, which we have plenty of, because if you look at it on a square footage basis of redevelopment, I think you have a pretty high number of luxury development here.
Sure. So, I don't want to relitigate NoHo Soho with you. I think we spent a lot of years doing that, and with a lot of folks, that are on the dais. I will say that, there is, I think the city is looking for as many ways and as many different ways as possible to deliver affordable housing. And those models and those approaches will look different neighborhood to neighborhood, lot by lot. And we're really trying to leverage, I think, the asset here, which is the market and the market's ability to generate, and fit into this cross-subsidy model to do that. I think, I think another, to your point of, sort of trying to have it all, and asking CB2 to deliver it all. I think what I will say to that is, I think there is an immense opportunity to make meatpacking into what is now sort of a very market rate housing, but probably commercial sort of like front or first, right? Like, I think when you think of meatpacking, right, housing is not the first thing that comes to mind, right? And I think it also is about distribution of housing and distribution of affordable housing geographically. And I don't know if you guys want to add anything else. I mean, there were a lot of questions
I
packed
think
into
there
one.
may be 5 housing units in what we consider in CB2, the meat packing district. 5, because they're not allowed. So, I mean, of course, nobody thinks about it as housing.
Right. And I think that that is an opportunity that we are trying to.
And then the AMI bans I just wanted to talk about, because generally when everybody, of course, wants more affordability, but the sliding scale then is more luxury in order to produce that. So we're kind of put in a position of less housing affordability. I mean, it's the sliding scale is always this dynamic that ends up that the developer benefits.
Look, I think there's absolutely a trade-off conversation that needs to happen here in terms of AMI. I think we share the goal of maximizing. That is why, like, the RFP will, be very explicit about our goal to reach 50%. I think, we are prepared to talk in more detail about what that scale sort of looks like in these future sessions. But yes, there is, all of those things are interrelated, right? The height, the bulk, the affordability, the percentage of affordability. None of these things can be spoken to in isolation, and there will have to be trade-offs that happen. I just want to be, I want to be extremely upfront about the fact of, the goal of 50% affordable. As we scale down in height, the ability to maintain or to get to the goal of 50%, it is not formulaic, right? Because I think Dan kind of mentioned this in his section, is that there is sort of additional value as you get taller, because the higher floor units do command higher rent and premium, sort of premium rent, right? And so there is a certain level of height that is needed in order, again, to use this cross-subsidy model to reach these percentages and potentially these lower AMIs that we are talking about.
All right, thank you. Let me get Arturo first. Okay, we'll get Arturo, and then Anita has a question, and then we'll move on to CB2 members online.
Cool. Thank you. I think a little bit of this will be somewhat related to what has been noted, but as the EDC noted, this plan arrived to us as a negotiation. And I'd like to know who negotiated on behalf of the housing, because I don't feel like this site plan has given enough consideration to the public benefit of housing. While the High Line, the Whitney, and open space, although privately owned in this case, are great, and certainly are benefits to the community, I think this plan is somewhat avoidant of the fact that we are in a serious housing crisis. The benefit that we are providing to the Whitney seems quite large relative to the benefit that we could be providing to others who need housing in our community. So I'd like to know who negotiated on behalf of the community for housing.
I think what I can say is that we are coming to you for feedback and for input on housing as it relates to, again, AMI band percentages. This is very early in the process. Like, you are who we are coming to negotiate and have conversations on behalf of housing.
So then you agree that this is not the final, this is not the final site plan and you're open to amendments?
I will say that we are open to having conversations and continue to have conversations, but we are aiming to release an RFP in January of next year.
Okay. I just want to know that, you know, if you have comments, go ahead.
Hi, sorry, thanks. I would just note, and thanks for the question, that what both Dan and Scott described before about how we arrived at the site plan, we really tried to give consideration to each party's needs. For the Whitney, it was horizontal circulation. For the Friends of the High Line, it was, you know, contiguous with their current facility. And housing, because we could go vertical at that portion of the site. I think what you saw tonight was the product of a very thoughtful effort by the three parties to find a suitable solution.
Okay. So I'd just like to note that either we're open to having a conversation about the site plan and the footprint of the buildings, or you've already decided this in advance before coming to us and are not letting us have input on the site plan and the footprints.
So we are seeking your input to what Gigi mentioned before of various areas, but the site plan itself, each party with their architectural teams worked very hard at finding something that worked. It was a very difficult exercise that it can't be reopened at this point.
Okay. I just want to make sure that in these types of situations, earlier you said that there was Executive Order 43, EDUC is taking on more projects where you're looking at city-owned sites. If you do want to work with us, then you do need to bring us in earlier. It doesn't kind of make sense to me to say, hey, we have a site plan, we invited other parties, but we haven't invited the community to negotiate the footprint or the site plan, which I think, you know, I hope that the parties involved are still open to changes on that site plan. You know, never say never. So I hope that as we go forward in the next years to come, that you actually will work with us on potential adjustments that benefit the community and housing. My second question is, can you give us a little bit more idea of what the plans are for the Whitney expansion? Is it going to be one solid building? Will it have public access during the daytime? Is there a timeline and fundraising plan? What is the backup plan if one can't deliver on the construction? How do we know? And just here's my gut feeling that happens in New York from what I can tell is that, you know, you're not you personally, but that the Whitney may be hoarding this land until, you know, it becomes convenient for them to develop on it. You know, what kind of public benefit can you guarantee, or can you give us, motivate us that, you know, this is the right decision to make?
Yeah, well, we don't have like a timeline in terms of the actual fundraising that we need to do, nor would we even have a budget, because we would have to establish, based on going through the ULURP process, et cetera, how big a thing we'd actually would build, how much it would cost, what the design would be. We definitely, the guiding principles behind it, which you saw hopefully in my presentation, in terms of creating more space for art, for educational activities, for the community, for the increasingly, you know, larger, younger, more diverse public that we serve, and for the kinds of programs that have been sought out by, you know, people in our neighborhood and beyond. So those would be the driving ideas. But in terms of the actual, is there a theater that's this big? Is there a number of galleries that are that big? You know, what's happening in our lobby? That would all take time to consider further. But we have no interest in hoarding land. We have a real interest in doing this. We've been in the building now for almost, 10 years. I wouldn't be standing here talking about this if I didn't believe that there was a need and something that we could also give back. When we talk about the needs of the Whitney, there, as we interpret based on also people who come to the Whitney, people who show art there. And so it's to me the opposite of hoarding. We would be raising money to try to create something, and hopefully some of the good faith that you see in the kind of exhibitions that we do, the programs that we offer for free, the audiences that we're welcoming would suggest where our values are in that regard.
Yeah, and just to continue on that question.
Yes.
So this kind of goes back to my open space question. So the Whitney's planning to retain that open space and own it. Is that something that could be incorporated into the existing expansion and that leaving that open space potentially for housing, something to consider for the parties that are involved?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's something we considered endlessly in the site planning conversation. And I'm not an architect or an urban planner, but as we tried to understand it, it was suggested there were certain considerations. There has to be a certain amount of space between south-facing windows in a residential building and the north of the Whitney, let's say. So if you
We're considering commercial and other types of use cases in those first few floors, no?
well,
There was no consideration of commercial in the first few floors?
I mean, it would be several floors. I would hand it over to the EDC colleagues to talk about the math on how that would work if you didn't build units
I'm
there.
just saying there doesn't necessarily have to be housing on the first south-facing
Sure,
side. That would allow for a buffer or for a smaller space between the two buildings.
I just want to be a little cognizant, I just want to jump in and just be a little cognizant of time. I know we started a little bit late, so I just want to
I have one more question after this, and then it's
Okay,
not for you, so
me?
I think that's fine. Yeah,
Okay,
that's fine.
great, thank you.
So this is another question for, I think, the EDC. So if this is a project on public land that will require public input during the ULURP, why has so much of the site allocation already been determined? For example, the number of apartments, what will be left to discuss during the ULURP, and why has so much of this process been predetermined so far ahead of the expected ULURP action?
Sure. So we are coming to you with the proposal of the 600 units. And we're sharing with you what our principles and what our guidelines are that led us to kind of what you saw today. I think these all have to be approved as part of ULURP, right? And so I think we're saying, yes, we did put a lot of thought into the site plan because we have to start somewhere and give you something to start with and respond to. But I think, this community board knows very well that all of this still has to pass ULURP.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is it a quick question? Okay.
So you identify the key areas for public input, affordability goals, ground floor retail programming, public realm and street life and design. I think Arturo hit a little bit on the ground floor programming, the retail, but the public realm's not owned by the city. That's the Whitney's. And so I'm just wondering what this, when you're looking for input, what that means, because this housing site is so small that it's difficult to understand what, if that's just the input you're looking on that small northwest corner on the whole site.
Yeah.
The city, it's not the city's property that's being developed. So it's just hard to understand what you're looking for from us, because it sounds like most of this has been predetermined.
So I'm just going to have them pull up the site map for a second. So I think, in the presentation, people referred to the divot many times, just sort of where the meat packing trucks have backed into where there's no sidewalk, right? So this actually is this sort of pinkish orangish triangle is actually currently state DOT jurisdiction. We've been working with state DOT, them understanding our what we'd like to do with this site is that we would once we reach a certain milestone in this process, the state would give the city back that land. And so I think as far as public realm, certainly we are we've begun conversations with DOT to think about things like sidewalk, about traffic flow, about pedestrian flow. When we say public realm, we're thinking sort of what is the 360 experience of this site, which would include things like the Whitney open space, which would include things like kind of reclaiming this land to make it more pedestrian friendly and sort of connect it to the north and south. It's sort of a little dead area right now. We have conversations about potentially thinking, should there be more pedestrian plazas in and around this area to accommodate a significant increase in residents? I think those are the kinds of public realm circulation design conversations that we would like to have under the umbrella of public realm.
I guess I'm just a little confused because the plan for the neighborhood is significant pedestrianization all around this area. And it looks like from this that the space has already been allocated to these other uses. So, I mean, there's housing, the Whitney's expansion, the open space. So I guess it's just confusing to me what you're asking from us. And, and you're looking for it in such a short period of time without being able to really have any discussions. The board can't participate in the community's discussions because of the crossover. And so it's just, and then the accelerated time frame of what you're looking for from us, it doesn't feel like that we can give very good feedback, as well as hearing, from the other stakeholders in this community and what they're looking for. I mean, we've have multiple projects that we've heard about, haven't all been fleshed out, that are right in this immediately impacted area that one would hope, was developed altogether, particularly since those are other public-private, however you want to talk about those relationships. So in some ways there can be too much or too little, and we have Hudson River Park just to the west. So it's difficult for us to do this in such a short period of time, and I would think in a meaningful fashion.
Right. So I would just point us back to the timeline, which is that all of these conversations of those areas where we want your input will continue once there is a developer. The developer that is chosen, they will come before you and have those conversations. As we go into ULURP, those conversations will continue. So this is not, we're making all of these decisions, aggressively and right now. I think, again, like 2026 and 2027 is when we're looking at ULURP. So again, I just want to stress that there's like 2 years of time here for us to continue talking.
Okay, thanks, Carter. I'm going to go quickly back to, okay, Susan, and then we'll go to Frederick. Oh, I'm sorry. Then we'll go to Ritu and Janine.
Just want to recap or clarify what I think we've heard you say. And both Katie and Stella referred to city-owned land. Why isn't it 100% affordable housing? You, I believe, have said 2 explanations why that is not the case. One, it would be impossible, time-consuming process through underfunded departments to come up with a solution to that problem, going that path of 100% on city-owned land. But at the same time, you also said, if I heard you correctly, it's not even actually city-owned land because it's the Whitney's, based on a deal when the Whitney Museum was being planned and being built. So if that's the case, then it's actually not city-owned land, and that explains why we just get the little tiny corner in the Northwest for housing, with the explanation that the Whitney couldn't accommodate anything other than that. So am I correct? Are we correct in hearing it's not city-owned land? And there are 2 reasons why it can't be 100%, and that it's really up to the Whitney.
All right, thanks. So I guess just to break those back into 2, you're correct that the primary motivation for why this isn't an HPD funded project is timeline, and that an HPD funded project would take up to 10 years after ULURP approval. And we're, through this cross subsidy model, able to deliver housing, both affordable and market rate, much more quickly. So the land that we're talking about, that the Gansevoort Market is on, is city-owned land. The Whitney has a right of first offer on that. So if the city wanted to do any sort of disposition, anything with the site, whether to sell it or lease it to a private party, we would have to go to the Whitney first. So it's not the Whitney's land, but they have a right to it. So that's why we're here.
Thanks. I go to CB2 board members that are online. Ritu, and then we'll go to Janine.
Great. So I just want to start by saying I think the overarching goal is commendable to try to address the housing crisis in New York. With that being said, you know, the EDC could focus on bringing to market the 26,000 units that are currently affordable but not available for rent. Beyond that, though, I'm going to address some things that my fellow board members have not, since I live in the area and I've gone through the ULURP process further down. The scope of the tower is far beyond anything that is in Lower Manhattan other than Wall Street. You've got, you know, you're comparing it to the Citibank building in Midtown Manhattan. There are no services, fire, police, sewage. There's already an overburdened street system with the 7 million plus visitors that we get in the area. So a few of my questions are, what does the goal of 50% affordable mean? Does that mean 50% will be affordable, or that you will try to get to 50%? That's one question. My second question is, will these units remain permanently affordable? Is there anything to prevent them from going to market rate as other units of affordable housing have gone? And further, with the height of the out of context tower for the affordable housing, which, by the way, I'd also like to know, were other agencies that fund affordable housing, such as, you know, New York Housing Trust or New York State Housing Finance or the AHC, were they considered to help fund the cost of the affordable units? And why is the tower so high? Could not some of those floors be accommodated above the Whitney, above the High Line?
Okay, so I'm gonna take your questions a little bit out of order. So in regards to permanent affordability, we understand and share the sentiment that permanent affordability should be prioritized, and we are working very diligently to be able to deliver this commitment as part of the RFP. So I think more to come on that, but we share that goal. The other question around sort of some of the other entities that you have mentioned, you know, my understanding is that they do some sort of, like, some of them do finance and some of them, but they don't really do complete development plans. And so, you know, I think the answer is it's not quite the right fit for what we're trying to deliver here. And then, sorry, there was a third question. Permanent affordability.
Yeah, what does the goal of 50% mean? I mean, that strikes me.
Sure. So the goal of 50% is really us drawing a clear line in the sand for prospective developers when they respond to this RFP, when this RFP hits the public and developers are submitting and putting together what we hope will be a very competitive plan that they know will be compared and contrasted with, you know, their fellow developers, that it's clear to them, and sort of in conversations with you all leading up to the release of the RFP, of like what we want those income bands to be, and for them to put their best offer on the table to get to that goal. And so we want to be sort of unapologetically clear that, you know, if you're not going to offer a substantial affordable program, that's not going to be a competitive response.
So what you didn't answer is that the tower is completely out of context and that there are no services available. Did you ever consider something that was lower and more in keeping with the neighborhood? You know, why were 600 units? I mean, that's completely out of context in terms of services.
So in terms of services, you know, we think that, you know, leading up to the ULURP conversation, we will have to perform an environmental impact study. So we think that some of those concerns will be surfaced and addressed. I think, you know, in conversations with the bid, we understand that there will be a very significant change to the neighborhood with the amount of housing that we're proposing. And I think these are things that you know, we are open to discussing and want to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success. I just want to hand the mic over to Dan briefly to talk about the rationale for housing density at this site in particular.
Okay, and then
Thank you.
also the shadowing that's going to be created by that building, its impact on the park, Little Island, et cetera.
So in terms of height and density and why this is a really great site for housing. One, I would say, let's just talk about macro neighborhood location. It's really blessed with a lot of civic infrastructure. You have great, you know, bike access. You have great, you know, subway access further east. You have the open space, obviously. Why is it so valuable to live here? Who wouldn't want to live here? So it really is a fantastic place. As I said before, as it's on the edge, it's away from the historic districts, which really
But it creates a wall for the rest of.
Sorry, let me finish, please. It's away from the historic districts, which I have done work in the historic districts, and I will tell you it's enormously hard to create any housing there, and certainly not affordable housing. So it preserves the low and mid-rise quality of the substantial amount of historic districts in this community without by locating it outside. The site plan itself, you know, I know there are really two intertwined issues when we talk about increased density. One is the number of people and the impact on infrastructure, and the other is height becomes the proxy for that. But also, I have to say, what I really like about this site plan is it's not girthy, it's not fat, it's thin, it's slender. It definitely, you know, their view from the High Line to the water is the blockage is minimized because it's a thin form, it's a wedge-shaped form. And finally, I think I talked about this already, it does two things. One is it takes, you know, as opposed to in the historic districts, forcing housing there, puts it on the edge, but allows people to enjoy the benefits of the neighborhood and create a mixed income, mixed use, more vibrant, more 24/7 community. So I think those are the points. One last thing, in terms of shadows, want to say two things. I mentioned it before, but I want to reiterate, you know, shadows, big slab, low, bulky, or mid-rise, bulky slab form buildings like the standard create more shadows than taller, thinner spire type forms, number one. And number two, obviously we'll go through a extensive environmental review at that point during ULURP, and all of the shadow studies will be completed to the letter of the law.
All right, thank you.
Can I go?
Janine?
I want to talk money. First of all, I want to understand the subsidies. What is the Whitney paying to exercise its option? What is it receiving to give up the remaining right of first offer? And what, if any, subsidies is it receiving? The same with the High Line, same with the meat market, the relocation of the 7 companies. So if you could take us through the subsidies that each of these entities is getting financially.
Hi, everyone. So to clarify, the Whitney project will be will be privately financed. So there is no subsidy in terms of the ROFO. As Kevin explained earlier, we are negotiating this outside of the ROFO, given that we want to make sure that all parties can have the proper uses that they are looking for the site. So this ROFO was negotiated back in 2011. So that was that agreement, but nothing has been negotiated in terms of pricing, or any funding has been given to Whitney or Whitney provided to the city in order to move forward with this transaction.
Can you share the terms of the ROFO?
I mean, we can probably take
Yeah,
that
I mean,
back
after
and-
the meeting, if need be, since
Sure, yeah.
it's a legal document. What about the High Line or the meat market?
Sorry, the High Line, that I think the answer that Maria just gave for the Whitney is the same answer for the High Line. For the meat market, though we are still finalizing the terms of that agreement, so we're not able to share that at this moment.
Got it. And the money that is in that agreement, would that come out of this project, or would that come from a different bucket?
Because of ongoing negotiations, we can't share that right now.
Okay, so more on the money. In terms of the site plan, we've talked about that it's not negotiable. Are the buildings separate and therefore not optimizing the site because the building and because the Whitney and the High Line need to fundraise first? And is there a creative solution around that?
But by separate, yes, that they're not going to travel together kind of in parallel, like, right? They will be sort of staged in independent.
Well, they're separate in time and they're separate.
Yes, the answer is
yes. Yeah, okay. So the question is that, okay, and then just want to ask another, be more specific, since it's I just saw this come. How much is being paid for the site to buy out the meat market leases?
So that answer remains the same. It's an ongoing conversation, and we are not able to share that right now.
Got it. And my question is, if that number goes up or down, does that impact the affordable housing?
No.
Okay. And then back to the affordable housing and money. First of all, I looked at HPD's presentation for 388 Hudson. I tried to put it in the chat, but it doesn't work that way. But their slide, now maybe they're wrong, but their generic slide was something along the lines of it's 5 to 8 years from conception to tenanting. So I don't know if your timeline's any slower than that. So I guess if you could just check on your timing issues and get back to us. But in terms of money, there's just was $5 billion committed as part of the City of Yes housing opportunity. I know a lot of that is for infrastructure, but some of it is for housing. And can some of that money be used as a source of subsidy to get more affordable housing?
I can't speak to City of Yes at this moment.
But I think if you could get back to us on that, that would be helpful.
Sure.
And then I do just want to, I feel like I'm just going to be a little bit of a, whoops. I'm going to be a little bit of a repeating person on this, but city agencies, whether it's HPD or EDC, can't come to us and have a slide that says CB2 hasn't produced enough housing and then propose building less, but maybe if we're lucky, 50% affordable housing on a city-owned site. We've seen these slides before. I want to point out that the Google headquarters and the city council changes to that eliminated 300 units of affordable housing and even more of market rate housing. And despite, and in Hudson Square, it's constantly office space over housing. So I just want to highlight that you can't have your cake and eat it too. Either give us 100% affordable housing or pull that slide. And I just want to point out Essex Crossing was 50% affordable housing. You said it was 9 or 10 sites. It was huge. It was creating a whole new neighborhood in an already extremely poor neighborhood historically relative to the meatpacking bid and the wealthy neighborhoods in Greenwich Village, West Village, and Chelsea, which is basically sandwiching the meatpacking district. So this is a neighborhood that is ripe with resources, as one of your colleagues just pointed out, in terms of amazing schools, access to parks on the west side, and so forth. I guess I would like you guys to reconsider your site plan, your structure, and ways to get more affordable housing, because there's money there. There's desire there in terms of the community, and it just makes a lot of sense. But we'll send you and then I guess I think it's important before the RFP for the community to understand the money. What is being spent? What did, in terms of the Whitney, the meat market leases and so forth. Oh, and and one more question. We talk about, Highline had their winter lecture and wanted to have a lecture, and so many people came. I don't necessarily know if you need to build new space to have winter lectures. You can go to Pier 57 where you're holding your meetings across the street. You can go to 75 Morton. And by the way, look at 75 Morton, this location, for one of your future meetings if you need to have a different date, because it is easier to get to from the subways.
All right, thank you. So I understand that there's additional questions in the room from both the committee and CB2 members. As a courtesy to the public that is here, I'd like to ask if the committee members and CB2 members could hold their questions for now. I'd like to start the public session. If we have time permitting, I'll go back to questions from the committee and the CB2 board members. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie for the public session.
Thank you, Eugene. And you have a clock there that people can see? Okay. We have some people who've signed up. If you didn't sign up to speak and you want to sign up, there are speaker cards at the end of the table. Please fill one out. I'll call about 4 people. I'll call, please, when you're called, come up here. Yes, thank you. Gigi has the microphone. And I'll call 4 people, and if you come up, and then we'll call the next group. Andrew Berman, Catherine Schoonover, Nick Romanoff, and someone Tisu from 55 Horatio Street. Sorry, I can't really read your handwriting. E. Tisu. Is that anyone who's here? Okay. Good evening, Andrew. Thank you. And thank you to all the members of the public for being patient during this time.
Thank you very much. So I'm Andrew Berman from
village preservation. And briefly, look, we think the expansion of the Whitney is a great thing. We think the expansion of Friends of the High Line is a great thing. We think adding more affordable housing in this neighborhood is a great thing. We think the scale of what is proposed here is a horrible thing. It is horrendous, it is unacceptable, it is completely inappropriate. Yes, the area along West Street is denser than the rest of the neighborhood with 200-foot tall buildings, not 600-foot tall buildings. And the idea that we have to pay in this neighborhood for affordable housing with luxury condos and super luxury rentals on public land is outrageous. That is governmental malpractice. So the first and easiest way to bring the scale of this down to something that could be more acceptable for this neighborhood is to get rid of the luxury housing. We don't need more of that in this neighborhood. That is not what our city's housing crisis is about. It's not about a lack of luxury condos. It's about a lack of affordable housing. And I just want to give a little context in terms of the scale of what we're talking about when we say 600 units. 2 Fifth Avenue, one of the biggest apartment buildings in New York City, half that number of units. Westbeth, 13 buildings, a little more than half the number of those units. West Village Houses, which is 42 buildings on 6 blocks, only 2/3 the number of units that you're talking about putting in this tiny little site. This is ridiculous. This is not what we should be doing with public land. It just does not make sense. And I have to point out, having the next public engagement session be a week from tonight, announced tonight, is ridiculous. That and many other things that we're hearing tonight do not sound even remotely as though this is intended to be a public engagement process. This feels as though you've made your decisions already and we get to comment on the color of the drapes. And if that's the case, say it. And that just means that if we want to push back on this, we have to do it outside of this process. So I'll wrap up there. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Catherine.
Hi, my name is Catherine Schoonover, and I've lived for over 40 years at 749 Washington Street, which is just a few blocks south of the super block we're discussing. This entire area is characterized by primarily low-rise buildings, and I was struck when you were talking about how the block, how the way the buildings worked within the block was so great that you didn't seem to have paid any attention to anything beyond that block. There are no buildings in our area that are anything close to 60 stories tall. Even Westbeth, Andrew just mentioned it, it's directly across from where I live. It's a mere 13 stories tall. And to me, it is enormous compared to my house. The Standard Hotel, which is right near where this building would be, is 18 stories tall. This would be 60. It's not even close. So I strongly oppose the building of a tower that's anywhere close to 60 stories tall. And if that Gansevoort Square is going to be a success, the size and scale of its buildings must respect the surrounding neighborhoods and the historic districts around it and to its south. I don't want to repeat things people have said. I agree that I don't understand why the city should be in the business directly or indirectly of building super luxury housing. And I think all of the housing built in Gansevoort Square should be permanently affordable housing. I strongly urge you to rethink any development here to ensure that it relates well to its context and surroundings. As public land, this parcel should only be used for public benefit purposes, and any affordable housing here must be guaranteed to be 100% permanently affordable, unlike what the city has done at several other locations, including the building that many people have mentioned, 388 Hudson Street, where they refuse to guarantee that it's permanently affordable. Thank you.
Hi there. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Nick Romanoff, and I'm here on behalf of Romanoff Equities. We are owners, developers, and stakeholders within the meatpacking district and operate various holdings in close proximity to this proposed development. We have been intimately involved in the transformation of the district for 4 generations now, as exemplified by our founding of the Meatpacking Association, which later became the BID. And I just want to clarify that we love the Whitney, and we're excited for, you know, their improvements and expansion. We think that, you know, for the Friends of the High Line as well. And yes, we do believe that there is a need for more housing here. But as it's been mentioned, the scale of which is completely inappropriate and out of context. Now, the meatpacking district is a landmarked area. Someone earlier mentioned that this northwest site was going to be as far from it as possible. It's across the street. Okay? You're proposing a 600-foot tower, 60 stories, plus or minus. The standard hotel, that would be 2.5 times the size of the standard hotel, excuse me. And if you look at the surrounding districts, Greenwich Village, Chelsea, West Village, the tallest in Chelsea is 350 feet high. Greenwich Village, 250, and the West Village, 235. And, you know, we need to look further into the idea of, does this project really serve the community, or will it compromise the unique qualities that make the meatpacking district so special? Will it be done efficiently and thoughtfully, or rushed to achieve an unrealistic goal while leaving residents and owners to deal with the aftermath? You started a little early, so. Look, long-term, most importantly, I want to touch on the building on the northwest corner. Given the height and given the density, this is going to affect, it's going to block light, air, views, and change the area's visual identity completely.
So please wrap up, please.
Effectively, it's an oxymoron, a skyscraper in the meatpacking district, and we completely oppose the current proposal with regard to the residential.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing, is E. Tisu here from 55 Horatio? 55 Horatio? No, okay. Susan Midler, can the following people come up? Susan Midler, Paul Hoag, Haug, sorry if I mispronounced, Tara Lewis. Any of these people here, please come forward. And then we'll go to the,
Is this on?
go to the Zoom.
Yeah, I am Susan Midler from the 3436 Barrow Street Corporation, and we are completely opposed to this tower in this area that is so inappropriate. You are telling us that you are going to put 600 people. That is an astronomical number of people that you're putting into this tower when the infrastructure is of a very deep concern there. It's also the transportation, it's the light, it's the flooding area, and it's the access to the Whitney, it's the access to the High Line. And I think you need to totally reconsider this enormous skyscraper in this area. This took us by so much surprise. I was sent here on an emergency basis to allow you to allow our co-op to terribly oppose this idea. You need to find another site for this building in this area, which will stand out like a total eyesore for the whole area. And that's basically all we have to say. So you can go on to the next person, but we're totally opposed to this. Totally.
Thank you. I think this is Tara Lewis.
Yes, I'm Tara Lewis.
Oh.
I'm not actually from your neighborhood. I'm on 22nd and Broadway. But I went to Barrow Street Nursery School as a kid. I was born on Bond Street. I was born on 52 Bond Street, which is actually still there, unbelievably. And I am also completely opposed to this tower. Having grown up here, being a part of this city, I feel that my city is under assault by developers, and the character is being changed to become unrecognizable, and we will look back and we will be horrified by the buildings that have gone up. They are not to scale. Most of them are hideously ugly, and we will really regret having torn down beautiful, beautiful buildings. to build these things for the sake of greed. When I look at the buildings around Central Park, these huge towers, I see greed. And this building to me looks like greed. And it's not attractive, and it will not look good in the future. And we will look back with a lot of shame on that. And I'm here to just point that out. I'd like everyone to take that in and think about your city. Think about what it looks like and why people visit and why people care about it, and being part of a neighborhood, having an aesthetic value. Those things are important. It is not all about money. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. There are 5 people online who would like to speak. David Holovka, Zach Weinstein, Asher Lasday, Judith Pucci, and Jean Cryer. Have they all been elevated so that we can call on them? Okay, so he's ready? Zach, are you ready?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, my name's Zach Weinstein. I'm with Save Gansevoort. Got a couple of questions. First of all, EDC states that the new structure will contain up to 50% affordable housing. This percentage refers to the number of units in the building. But the affordable units are likely to be much smaller than the market rate luxury units. What percentage of the building's actual square footage will be reserved for affordable housing as opposed to the market rate housing? And isn't this a more meaningful metric to use? Second, up to 50%. 50% is low, and it seems to be purely aspirational. If this city is in a crisis, and we are, why isn't there a rock-hard requirement for a significantly larger percentage of affordable housing? Next, will there be any cap on the profit that's made by the developer of this site? Has there any consideration been given to having the city or a nonprofit organization develop the site? Last, what is the projected FAR of the residential building? What I took away from the presentation this evening is that the Whitney, and to a lesser extent Friends of the High Line, appear to be driving the need for a 600-foot tall building that is grossly out of scale and out of character with the adjoining historic districts, and which will have a radically negative effect on that district. The proposed tower would be nearly 3 times the height of the Standard Hotel, which is already way out of context with the area. And at the same time, we're devoting most of the space within that building to luxury market rate housing. I have to say that the site plan is not acceptable. It's deeply unfortunate that this plan has apparently been developed, nearly to completion without any community input or awareness. I think it's ridiculous that we're trying to jam in the remaining 2 public meetings in the next month during the holiday season, and that there is this rush to put out an RFP at the beginning of next month. I really think that the city can and must do better than this. Thank you.
Perfect timing. Thank you, Zach. Is David Halauka on? I hope I.
Yes.
Okay, you could start your 2 minutes now, sir.
Okay, thank you. I am David Holoka, an architect and board member of Save Chelsea, speaking on the group's behalf. While the proposed development falls just south of Chelsea, it has broader community impact. The nearly 600-foot tall residential building would cast shadows over areas of the High Line and Hudson River Park well into Chelsea. It would also disastrously shadow nearby Little Island. What's the difference between this, quote, iconic spire and the super talls reviled by visitors to Central Park? The tower would in fact dwarf and diminish 2 of the most distinguished modern buildings to have risen along the High Line, Renzo Piano's original Whitney Museum building and Ennead Architects' nearby Standard Hotel. As for the desperate argument that this tower would, quote, preserve West Village character by building needed density along its border, well, thanks for the best laugh I've had in a long time. The proposal's market rate housing component should not be needed to fund affordable housing on this site, where the land already belongs to the city. A developer's land cost here would far outweigh construction cost. And what about revenue from the High Line, ground floor retail, and what looks like a more than double-sized Whitney? Public land should not be a platform for luxury housing that will only supercharge escalation of already high local housing costs, making life in New York more expensive. Save Chelsea does not subscribe to the trickle-down theory of market rate housing, but our elected officials do. That should make us especially wary of this proposal. Save Chelsea supports the construction of only 100% permanently affordable housing on this site. Any added space for the Whitney Museum and Highline should be within an appropriately scaled design. We call on their leadership to prioritize the public good and participate only in a right-sized project that is sensitive to the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your remarks. Next is Asher Lasday.
Hey, yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Cool. Yeah, so I mean, first of all, thank you all so much for, just all the really interesting perspectives and the facts and arguments you made. It's been a real pleasure to hear so many neighbors who care so much about their neighborhood. I just want to say straight out, I'm like very supportive of this project, and I think generally building more housing in the area. And earlier someone talked about trying to have their cake and eat it too, and I'm curious, there seem to be these two issues, right? There's like one concern, which is this isn't 100% affordable. And then there's this other concern, which is it's out of scale with the neighborhood. I guess I would ask, if the building was still 60 stories high and had 600 apartments, but was 100% affordable, would we support it then? My guess is a lot of people probably wouldn't. But the truth is, with a limited budget for building affordable housing, often the city has to make tough decisions about where they're going to spend that money. And if you're not going to build a ton of housing in one place, it's just not worth it for the city to build housing there, because then they'll build it somewhere else. So, if we're gonna, again, I'm not a land economist by any means, but my guess is if we were willing to put more affordable housing here, then we could have a serious conversation about, or like more density here, we could have a serious conversation about building 100% affordable housing. If we're not willing to do that, then we have to start to think about, okay, the city has limited funds. They should be more, but they're not. We need to solve this problem now, right? I mean, I grew up in New York. I can tell you it's been incredibly sad to see my friends who aren't making millions of dollars in consulting and finance increasingly say, I'm going to move to Philly, I'm going to move to Detroit, because housing is just not affordable here. I wouldn't still be here if I wasn't living with my parents in my mid-20s. If we really want to take this problem seriously, we need to consider how much we care about views or how much we care about preserving the neighborhood, the nature of the neighborhood, which is not just what it looks like aesthetically, but also who can afford to live here. Maybe you got lucky by being here early, or maybe you got lucky by having a lot of money. But for those of us who aren't as lucky, how can we let those people still live here?
Thank you very much. Judith Pucci, are you on?
Yes, you can hear me? Can you
Yes,
hear
we
me?
can. Thank you. Yes, we can.
Good,
Yes, we can.
excellent. I'm just going to lend my voice to the criticism that's already been made about the height of the building, just to build up support for this idea, which I agree is a terrible one. The cross-subsidy model is interesting. It's a new one to me, and I found it very interesting. But I cannot see it justify a 600-foot building completely out of proportion to its surroundings. Buildings should enhance the essence of what makes a neighborhood vital and desirable to begin with. 600 feet does not do that. 600 feet is actually a problem. Add on to that what has already been said about the issue of the inability of there being infrastructure to support this. And what everybody has been saying so far, you can see that this is a problem that's not going to disappear. People are not going to support a 600-foot building in this neighborhood, nor should they. It's really a terrible idea. And that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pucci. And I assume that that Jean Cryer is on, is right there for us. Okay. Are you ready? Oh, we can't hear you. We can't hear you. Can you unmute yourself? We have to do something on our end to help her get unmuted. Ask her to what?
There we go. Thank you. I've got the button to me. Thank you so much. And thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. I'm Jean Creer. I've lived in this Greenwich Village neighborhood for almost 40 years in the CB2 and also now in the CB3 district. I'm on 4th Avenue. A lot of what I wanted to say has been said, but let me emphasize just the 4 key points. I strongly, strongly oppose a 60-story building being built on this site for various reasons. First of all, it is public land. This site is on the state and the National Register of an historic district. What we need on public land, yes, is expansion of the Whitney, possibly. Yes, I was there on Sunday. I was there at the High Line. I love all of this cultural experience around us, but 50% of this unit, of this tower, will be luxury apartments. And luxury apartments is not what New York City needs. We've already got more than we have of luxury apartments. So this is not really solving the goal of providing more affordable housing. The cross subsidy plan really will be of ultimate benefit to the developers. Eric spoke at the beginning of this and said the goal is to have maximum benefit to the community. I really think this will have maximum benefit to the developers who will be behind it. I urge you to oppose this at all in every way that you can. And I have one question. What will the FAR zoning district be that is being considered for this area? And how is the city going to determine that? Oh, and last, one other thing. This should be permanent affordable housing, not like what we are seeing at the 388 Hudson site that is already moving forward, which the city is not guaranteeing that it would be permanent 100% affordable housing. But can anyone address the FAR question?
Thank you. Thank you. Your time is up. And we will ask the presenters to come back and answer all the questions at once. But I just want to assure you that this committee wants 100% affordable housing at 388 Hudson. And we are determined to get the, the promises, buttoned down for that. So we're with you on that. There are 3 more people who've signed up to speak online. Joel Lobenthal, Dina Tass-Winter, a former neighbor of mine, and Anita Isola. Joel, you're first on my list. Are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
In, please.
Yeah, okay. I want to say that we are seeing the city and the mayor and the city hall trying to supersize most of the city. So this enormous decontextualized height looks to me like another Trojan horse to induce a normalization of these supersized buildings in the village. Very suspicious of that. We keep hearing affordable housing bandied about as if it's something tangible and immutable. Affordable for who is my question. It's certainly not going to be affordable for the service workers who commute 4 hours a day. There's no way that's happening. So if you're talking about with this area, the AMI, excuse me, this is a very wealthy neighborhood. So the median income and the percentage of that is required by the tenant is going to be very high. I mean, we're here. I was just talking to a sociologist, an urban sociologist, who tells me that there are people in so-called affordable housing who earn $200,000 a year and pay $3,000 a month for a studio. That is not affordable. One more point, we are an extremely underserviced neighborhood. There is no hospital here. There is a trauma center. This incredibly valuable, irreplaceable St. Vincent's Hospital, was torn down for more condos. So we are desperately underserved in so many ways. And flooding this area with a huge influx of new population is something that is going to be traumatic in every way to this area. Do I have any more time?
I think you're almost where are we?
All right, I'll finish early. Thank you.
Good. Kudos to you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lobenthal. Dina Tass-Winter is next on my list. Hi, Dina. Nice to see you.
Hi. Thank you, Katie. Nice to see you too. So as
as Katie mentioned, I grew up in the West Village houses, so I'm speaking on my behalf in that regard, but also as the current Director of Preservation for Village Preservation. So I speak on behalf of the organization. And so I very much reiterate all of the points that Andrew Berman made earlier on, and including that this site must be 100% permanent affordable housing, and that this neighborhood, we don't need more luxury housing. We certainly don't, especially not on city-owned land, and that as you've stated, the goal of 50% affordable means at least 50% would be luxury, and that's just ridiculous here and outrageous and unnecessary. Let's see what else. Reiterating the question that a couple of people have posed during the comments about what FAR and zoning district will be contemplated here. We hope that that question can be answered by EDC in a little bit. And as a preservationist, I must restate that though the proposed site is outside of the Gansevoort Market City Historic District, it is in the State and National Register of Historic Places, and it's a significant site and part of the history of the neighborhood. And that is extremely important to us and to many neighbors. And that 600-foot or whatever height tower being proposed here, which is just quadruple, if not more, the size of anything anywhere nearby, will just look so very out of scale. And again, reiterating, we appreciate the Whitney so much on the High Line and need affordable housing here, but the scale of this project is just untenable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being so concise. The last speaker in this group is Anita Isola.
Hello, can you hear me?
Very
Okay.
well.
Okay, good. Nothing makes me happier than to see this expansion of the Whitney. I've been a member of the Whitney for 1,000,000 years. I love it. I'm there so much. But I was also raised in the West Village, and I am very sensitive to preserving the aesthetics of this whole area. Now, nothing could be more out of place than this tower. It's like to me, it feels like a Midtown style needle, and I know they want to do it so they could have more luxury housing. The affordable housing, assuming it's there, is not going to be up at the top. It's going to be down at the bottom. And I think it should be permanently affordable and 100%. And I'd like to just remind people, as Dana said, that this area is on the State and National Registry of Historic Places. And it's going to be just so damaged by putting something like this in that area. It's just unforgivable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mark, is that the end of and no one in the audience has wanted to speak further. So I think that concludes the public session.
Okay, great. I think since we have a little bit of time, we're going to return. I promised that we would return to some of the questions from our committee members. I know that there were a few outstanding. Stella, I think you had. Yes, they should. All right. All right. Do you want to take the questions first? Sorry.
As it relates to the zoning designation, that is a conversation that we are still having with DCP. What I can share is that DCP is not interested in a spot zoning, and so they would like something to be done, for the block. Right? Is that accurate? Okay, great. And then I just want to address briefly affordable for whom. just to put it in context, right? We're 485X, 25%, average 60% AMI. 60% AMI is around $93,000 for a family of 4 and $74,000 for a family of 2. So that just gives you the context of what we're looking at for at least 25% on average. Again, depending on how this board wants to split that, that is a conversation that we're open to. So, so I just want to give some context to the question of affordable for who. Understanding that you've made it very clear that you want 100% affordable housing, hear that very clearly. But again, I just don't want to lose sight of the range we are talking about here as a minimum starting point for conversation.
There were a couple other questions. I don't know if you wanted to address them. Was there a projected FAR?
We
This
don't
goes
have that.
with the zoning, yeah.
Correct.
A cap on profit, that was a question.
No.
And, you know, the idea of the square footage for the affordable housing, you know, not just versus units. You've been very clear about units, but something more,
I think what I can say to that is that the affordable unit sizes will have to conform to HPD requirements. So there are regulations on sizing.
okay. And I just want to make sure that there were a few repeated questions. So I think that those are the questions that I wrote down. Thank you.
Thank you, Gigi, for answering those questions. Quickly go to Stella.
Yes, hi, I can be as fast as possible. I just want to go back to a question raised earlier by a board member, Ritu Chatri. She was asking about other state subsidies, if they've been looked into. My ears perked up because she mentioned AHC, which is the Affordable Housing Corporation, which I actually work for. I know that it would not be applicable in this situation because it is only for owner-occupied units, not for rentals. But I also know that there are rental funding sources available. I'm just doing a little bit more quick research here. One example is in New York Housing for the Future rental program. From what I see, I think somebody mentioned in your response to Ritu that there was something about design issues. I'm not exactly sure what that means. Just looking at the design guidelines, goals, and objectives, the only criteria for these guidelines have been developed to ensure minimum standards of quality, function, and durability of projects funded by the agency. The goals and objectives of the design guidelines are to aid applicants and architects in producing functional, safe, durable, and cost-effective housing. It adds value to communities, pride amongst occupants, and promotes healthy living. So can you please elaborate on how extensively you've looked into state subsidy programs? And if you've concluded that they are not possible, can you please tell us why? If you can't answer me right now, maybe you could send it to us in writing. Thank you.
I'm happy to follow up. I'll only say, I think what I can answer is that design will be dictated by HPD design regulations as well.
I think that's fine because it says these guidelines do not exclude compliance with other criteria that may be required by the project funding sources or required by applicable codes, laws, or regulations. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't understand why design would be a reason why state funding sources would not be considered for this project.
Thanks. We haven't directly engaged with the state on this. I think the state has, you know, the same issues of funding constraints. You know, also that they need to, you know, fund affordable housing throughout the state. So the cross subsidy model, I think, can just be thought of as a way to deliver housing without requiring subsidy. Does that help address your question?
I mean, I know that these programs operate in conjunction with cross subsidy, so it does not preclude state subsidy.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you.
Stella.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Frederica, and then I think Eddie.
Yes,
you
thank
said
you.
Yeah.
Regarding my colleague Arturo's question about what will be left to discuss during ULURP, once the shovels go into the ground for the residential building, I think the ULURP will be pretty meaningless, and this process will become a charade. Also meaningless is expecting 1/4 of an acre of open space to provide light and air for a 600-foot building. Ritu asked this question, but I don't think I heard an answer. If the Whitney is looking for horizontal expansion, why can't residential be built above their expansion, in which case there could be more housing of both kinds? But if you go ahead with your RFP in January, it'll be too late to consider that. And again, we'll have a meaningless ULURP process. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Thank you for questions. So it's late. The first point was about the ULURP, and that the fact that the housing, it's meaningless to discuss it. I just want to reiterate that the site has to be rezoned. The whole thing's going to go through ULURP, the housing, Whitney, and the High Line all at once. And so nothing can happen until that, on the housing point, until that is done. That's number one. Number two is, and I just want to come back to this question of subsidy, waiting for subsidy versus the cross subsidization model. I'm an architect. We're in private practice. We do inclusionary housing, which is essentially cross subsidization, and we do HPD funded projects which wait for subsidy. I will tell you that the 10-year average, or the 10-year wait for funding, is absolutely the case. We have a project in the South Bronx, which is 100% affordable. It was the last Bloomberg RFP in the Bloomberg administration, and we are still waiting for the third out of the fifth building to get HPD funding. So you have to do the same process. You have to get the project entitled, disposition, go through ULURP, the cross subsidy model. They can then start the HPD model, the subsidy model. You get in line, you wait. You can talk to any affordable housing developer in town. Don't take our word for it. You can do your research yourself. It takes forever to get HPD funding. So in terms of speed to delivery, in terms of speed to delivery of affordable housing, in terms of speed of delivery of market rate rental housing, which I am sorry, does help the general housing crisis, because if you looked at the New York Times today, you would note that this community board, basically neighborhoods and the others, had the highest rental increases in the city. So more supply helps with the affordability issue. So the speed to delivery is very important. Finally, I do think it's a question that keeps coming back, and it's a completely good one. Like, why not stack the buildings? Why not? The real issue is all three projects are on individual timelines, individual sources of funds, individual ownerships. The stacking is quite complex. We have done them on smaller projects. It's sure physically feasible on a project this size. I don't think it's, from a financial and governance and getting this building built point of view, quickly to address the housing concerns. It is clearly not the best path, and that the fact that each use has sort of their land, their building, their sort of control of their destiny has been very, very important for all three parties. So that's why the site plan is really it's really sort of vertically sliced. So
So let's not leave the meeting with any ambiguity.
Frederica,
Frederica.
you are
Sorry.
muted.
So let's not end with any ambiguity. Gigi, will the construction on the residential building start before the ULURP in 2026?
No, absolutely not.
Thank you.
Okay. Eddie?
Thank you all for the presentation. I feel like I learned a lot in roller coaster fashion throughout all of this. What I thought I was going to come up entering the room today was to be excited for 300 units of affordable homes and to ask for more. It seems like instead of talking to EDC, the plea is to our good friends at the Whitney, which I love. Because it seems like it's city-owned land, kind of in name only, thanks to the foresight of the Whitney for this deal a while ago. And without restating a lot of the same stuff here, I would appreciate any plea for you all to reconsider other ways to add more units in addition to the existing ones, because we need more affordable homes in our district. If there's any way we can make additional modifications to the site plan, especially above the Whitney expansion, I think you would see somewhat of a warm reception here. But to actually get to a question that I'm not sure has been really super addressed and only on the edges is sort of the very first slide. There was discussion of streetscape improvements, especially street crossings to the Greenway and to the park. Is there anything involved in this project that includes pedestrian changes on West Street and the park itself?
So we're looking at public realm improvements primarily with on the boundaries of the site. But we certainly are open to, as we said, we've started conversations with DOT, and I'm not ruling those out, but I'm saying as part of this project in public realm, we're looking at the streets and blocks that border this particular site.
Yeah, my encouragement would be, since these improvements should hopefully draw more people to the area with a better museum, with a better High Line, with people living in their new affordable homes, that we realize there can be more pedestrian traffic there, and engaging with DOT on new ways to improve pedestrianation there would be really helpful.
Agree.
Great. All right. Thank you very much. You have one last question, Carter? We have a few minutes till the room is.
You reminded me here, just one other thing. There's 3 other publicly owned lots just to the north of this. Have you had any discussions with the state regarding those lots and utilizing this process to, move any projects forward there?
Yeah, so the state is right now, they have a 9A task force, right? They're looking up and down the 9A, sort of Route 9A on all of their sites, all of that traffic design. I will say that even getting that small triangle, a deal to seed that small triangle that is a state DOT site for this project has been challenging. And so my understanding is that because they are undergoing this 9A study, that is not something that, they're really eager to discuss right now.
Because I think that assemblage is larger, right, than this proposed site that you have where you're building residential housing.
Sure. I mean, I think what I'll pivot back to is like the pace of wanting to build the housing as one of the city's primary goals here, is that having to deal with the additional layer of state jurisdiction to city jurisdiction again adds time.
You understand that we're talking about 3 lots. We're not in the highway, but 3 empty lots where housing could be built. Is that clear? Okay, I just wasn't sure. Yeah. Right. And so, you know, if it's going to take 10 years, why, we would support your starting on that now. You know, this is a little bit outside what you're presenting, but
I'll let
we
the
would-
state know.
well, but we would support you in that. 100% affordable housing.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for our partners at Economic Development Corporation, the Whitney, Friends of the High Line. John, been great
Who has
to
to be at work tomorrow at 4 a.m.
oh, still hard at work. And thank you for the members of the public to come and give testimony and listen to this presentation. This is the beginning of a larger conversation. So looking forward to the next steps. And thank you very much.